"If you ever have nowhere else to go," her father had whispered, pressing the chain into her hands the night before he died, "bring this to them. They'll know what it means." Haley Carter had spent 5 years refusing to use it. 5 years of double shifts, empty fridges, and sleeping with the lights on. But the night she walked through the doors of the Iron Horse Tavern dragging that chain, every single Hell's Angels member in that room stopped breathing. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. And then the chapter president looks up and the color drains from his face. If you're watching this story, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The chain hit the hardwood floor of the Iron Horse Tavern with a sound that cut through everything, through the classic rock on the jukebox, through the crack of pool balls, through 200 separate conversations happening at once. It didn't clatter so much as it announced itself, heavy and deliberate, the way a gavel comes down in a courtroom when the judge has already made up his mind. Haley Carter didn't let go of it. She kept one end wrapped around her fist, the links pressing white marks into her palm, and she stood in the doorway of the most famous private biker bar in Tucson, Arizona, and she did not move. She was 20 years old, 5'4", wearing a second-hand denim jacket over a tank top, her blonde hair pulled back in a way that suggested she had not spent time in front of a mirror that morning. She had not. She had spent that morning sitting in her car outside the Arizona Department of Justice, reading a letter for the 4th time, and then she had driven 40 minutes to get here because there was nowhere else left to go. The vest was draped over her other arm. Old leather, worn soft from years of use, the kind of black that had been through weather and road and time until it stopped being a color and became something closer to memory. The patches were still intact, every single one, and down the left breast panel, stitched in white thread that had started to fray at the edges, was a name. 200 people in that bar saw her standing there. The music kept playing for exactly 4 more seconds. Then someone near the back killed the jukebox, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing Haley had ever heard. She had been afraid of this moment for 5 years. She had rehearsed it in her car on the drive over, working through what she might say, how she might explain herself, whether these people would listen or whether they would throw her out into the parking lot without letting her finish sentence. She had been afraid that she would cry. She had been more afraid that she wouldn't, that she had used up every tear she had during the past 5 years, and there was nothing left but this flat, exhausted determination that probably read, to strangers, as either stupidity or insanity. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was standing in the doorway of the Iron Horse Tavern holding her dead father's chain and his vest, and she was looking at the room the way a person looks at a last resort, with full knowledge of what it means that you've arrived here. "I need to speak to whoever runs this chapter," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "My name is Haley Carter. My father was Michael Carter, and before he died, he told me if I ever had nowhere else to go, I should bring this here." Nobody moved. She could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on her, could feel the way the room had reorganized itself around this moment. Conversations abandoned mid-sentence, pool cues held still. Beer bottles stopped halfway to mouths. She had walked into a room full of people who did not look at strangers kindly, and she had announced herself as the daughter of a dead man, and she was waiting to find out if that meant anything. For a long moment, it seemed like it might not. Then a man at the far end of the bar stood up. He was not the tallest person in the room, and he was not the youngest, and he was not doing anything dramatic. He simply stood up, set down his glass, and started walking toward her. And the crowd parted for him, the way crowds part for people who don't have to ask. He was somewhere in his mid-50s, broad-shouldered, with silver-threaded beard and the kind of face that had been lived in hard, not cruel, but weathered, the face of a man who had made serious decisions and lived with them. He was wearing a vest. She could read the bottom rocker from where she stood, Arizona, and above it, a title patch she had been told to look for, President. His name, she would learn in a moment, was Daniel Walker. The road name stitched on his vest, said Stone. He walked the length of the bar and stopped 4 feet in front of her, and he looked at the vest draped over her arm. And something happened to his face that she had not expected. He went very still. Not the still of someone who doesn't recognize something. The still of someone who recognizes it completely and needs a moment to absorb what that recognition means. Where did you get that? He said. His voice was quiet. That surprised her too. She had expected loud, had expected the voice of a man who ran a room. This was the voice of a man who had just seen something he thought was gone. It was my father's, Haley said. Michael Carter. He told me you would know the name. Daniel Walker Stone looked at the vest for another long moment. Then he looked at her face. She could see him doing the math, working through it, figuring out the years. Michael's daughter, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes. He exhaled slowly, reached out and took the vest from her arm carefully. The way you handle something that has earned respect. He looked at the patches. He looked at the name, and then he looked back at her, and there was something behind his eyes that she would spend the rest of the evening trying to name something between grief and guilt, and the particular expression of a man who has just realized he failed to keep a promise he didn't know he had made. Come inside, he said. Come sit down. She followed him to a back table that cleared as they approached, 2 men standing up without being asked, taking their drinks and moving away. The bar had started talking again, a low murmur filling back in around the silence. But Haley could feel the room still watching. She sat down across from Daniel. He laid the vest on the table between them. How long ago did he pass? Daniel asked. 6 years, Haley said. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, she saw the grief settle in real grief, not performed. I didn't know. He said, we lost contact. Michael, he stepped away from everything when you were born. Said he wanted something different for his family. He paused. I should have kept better track. He didn't want you to, Haley said. He wanted to do it on his own. He was stubborn that way. She paused. I got that from him. The corner of Daniel's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. What do you need? And there it was. The question she had driven 40 minutes to hear. The question she had been afraid to earn for 5 years because earning it meant admitting she had run out of road. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the letter. Set it on the table next to the vest. They took his shop, she said. My father spent 15 years building a repair business. After he died, I kept it running. I was 14 when he passed. My aunt helped me manage it for a while, but I was in charge of the actual work by the time I was 16. We had accounts. We had regulars. We had 6 employees. She stopped, breathed. 2 years ago, I got a notice from a law firm I had never heard of. They said the property had been sold. They showed me documents I had never signed. They had paperwork with my name on it that I did not write. Daniel looked at the letter, looked at her. Fraud. That's what I believe. But I can't prove it yet. I've been to 3 lawyers. 2 of them told me the case was too complicated and they didn't want to take it on contingency. The 3rd one took a retainer and then stopped returning my calls. She folded her hands on the table to keep them steady. I went to the Department of Justice. I filed a complaint. That letter is their response. They say they don't have enough evidence to open an investigation without more documentation. Documentation I can't access because the men who took the shop have locked me out of every record I need. The bar had gotten quieter again around their table. She wasn't sure if anyone was openly listening, but she had the sense that the conversation had weight, that it was radiating outward in the way important conversations do. Who are these men? Daniel asked. Their names are Robert Payne and Victor Sheldon. They run a company called Consolidated Asset Holdings. I've been looking into them for 6 months. She met his eyes. This isn't the first time they've done this. I found 2 other families, small businesses, owners who died or got sick, heirs who didn't know how to fight back. They find the gaps. They exploit them. And then they disappear behind paperwork and shell companies. Daniel sat back in his chair. He picked up the vest. He ran his thumb along the stitching of her father's name. Michael was a good man, he said. One of the best I ever knew. He left this life because he wanted better for you, but he never stopped being who he was. He set the vest back down. He sent you here because he knew what kind of people we are. Not what people think we are, what we actually are. I know what you actually are, Haley said quietly. He told me. Not everything, but enough. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. You said you refused to come here for years. I did. Why now? She was quiet for a beat. Because I'm out of moves. Because I've been fighting this alone for 2 years and I'm not winning. Because 3 days ago, Marcus Webb, he was my father's shop foreman, he's been helping me gather records someone ran his truck off a highway outside Tempe. He's in the hospital with a broken arm and 2 cracked ribs. Her voice didn't waver. She had decided before she walked through the door that she was going to say all of it. Because whoever these men are, they know someone is getting close, and they are not above hurting people to make that stop. The murmur around the table had gone silent again. Daniel's jaw tightened. You think it was deliberate, he said. Marcus drove that road every day for 11 years without incident, Haley said. The truck had new tires. The guardrail section that gave way had been inspected 8 months ago. And 2 days before it happened, Marcus told me he had found something. A name connected to Payne's company that shouldn't be there, a notary who had certified 3 documents on the same day in 2 different counties. She paused. He hadn't told me what the name was yet. He was going to call me the next morning. She looked at Daniel steadily. He called me from the hospital instead. The chair next to Daniel scraped back, and a younger man sat down mid-30s, sharp eyes, a road name patch that said Rook. He had clearly been close enough to hear most of it. You're saying they nearly killed a man to stop a paper trail, Rook said. I'm saying that's what I believe happened, yes. Rook looked at Daniel. Daniel was looking at the vest. Michael Carter, Rook said. He said it like he was checking a file in his memory. Short guy, dark hair, had that shop off of Campbell? Yes, Haley said. Surprised. He fixed my first bike, Rook said. I was 22. Transmission went sideways on a run. He had me back on the road in 4 hours and wouldn't take more than cost. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. He didn't talk much. But when he did, you listened. That was him, Haley said. And for the first time since she had walked through the door, she felt something loosen in her chest. That was exactly him. He talked about his daughter, Rook said. Once. We were waiting on a part to come in. He said he had a daughter who was going to be smarter than him, braver than him, and more stubborn than both put together. The not-quite smile appeared on his face, too. Sounds about right. She had not expected that. She had prepared herself for cold efficiency, for the hard, calculating assessment of people who dealt in hard things. She had not prepared herself for the specific, particular pain of having a stranger describe her father the way she remembered him. And it hit her somewhere below her sternum and stayed there. She held it together. She had promised herself she would hold it together. Daniel put the vest back on the table. I want to see everything you have. Every document, every name, every connection you've traced. He looked at Rook. Get Dex in here. He looked back at her. We have a man who spent 15 years doing fraud investigation before he came to us. He's going to look at what you've brought and tell us what we're dealing with. I have it in my car, Haley said. 3 binders, go get them. She stood up, stopped. I need you to understand something, she said, and her voice was quiet and very serious. I am not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm not asking for that. My father left me that chain because he trusted you to be decent people. I'm asking for help, finding the truth and making it stand up somewhere it can't be ignored. That's all. Daniel looked at her the way her father used to look at her when she said something that surprised him, like he was reassessing a calculation he thought he had already finished. Go get your binders, he said. She walked back through the bar. The crowd parted for her, this time not the way it parted for Daniel, not with that instinctive deference, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. She pushed out through the front doors and stood for a moment in the Arizona night, breathing air that smelled like dust and exhaust and creosote from the desert, scrubbed beyond the parking lot, and she pressed her palm flat against the warm hood of her car and she breathed. She had walked in, she had said it. She had not broken. She opened the trunk and pulled out the 3 binders she had spent 2 years assembling: the property records, the corporate filings, the notarized documents that did not match, the timeline she had rebuilt from memory and courthouse files, the names of the other families she had found. She had organized it the way she had learned to organize things when she was 16 and running a business, and everyone expected her to fall apart. She had not fallen apart then either. She carried the binders back inside. Dex was already at the table when she returned, a compact man in his 50s, with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and a legal pad in front of him. He had the quiet, systematic energy of someone who was very good at a very specific thing. He looked up when she set the binders down. "Which one has the property transfer records?" he asked. "The blue one," she said. "The timeline is in the green one." "I'd start with the notary discrepancy on page 47 of the blue binder. That's where I think the chain starts." He looked at her over his glasses. "You know how to build a chain of evidence." "I worked the front desk of a law office for 8 months, she said. "Right after I lost the shop. I needed to understand what I was looking at." He almost smiled. He pulled the blue binder toward him and opened it. For the next hour, Haley sat at that table and walked Dex through everything she had found. She answered every question he asked, even the ones that required her to admit the gaps in her knowledge. The places where the paper trail went cold. The moments where she had hit walls she couldn't get through alone. She had spent 2 years being afraid that admitting what she didn't know would make her look weak. Sitting here with Dex's reading glasses, reflecting the lamplight, and Daniel sitting quietly 2 chairs over, and Rook leaning against the wall, taking notes on his phone, she understood that admitting what she did know was the only way to find the people who could help fill it in. Around 10:30, Dex sat back, took off his glasses, and said, "This notary Raymond Chu, his certification seal appears on documents filed in Maricopa County on March 14th and on documents filed in Pima County on the same date. Counties are 115 miles apart. Notarizations have to be in person." "I know," Haley said. "So either Raymond Chu was in 2 places at once, or someone is using his seal without his authorization," Dex said. He turned to Daniel. "That's document fraud. If we can find Raymond Chu and establish where he actually was on March 14th, we have a foundation for a criminal complaint that's a lot harder to ignore than a civil dispute." "Can you find him?" Daniel asked. "I can find him," Dex said. He looked at Haley. "You said there's a second family. Other people who lost businesses to these men." "The Okafor family," Haley said. "They had a welding operation in Mesa. Owner died 2 years before my father's shop was taken. Same law firm was involved. I found the filing signatures. And there's a third one I'm still piecing together, a woman in Scottsdale who lost a catering business." Dex wrote down names. "Are any of them willing to talk? I spoke to the Okafor's son 2 months ago. He's been trying to fight it on his own. He's exhausted and broke, but he's still fighting." She paused. "He might be willing to be part of something bigger if he understood that someone was taking this seriously." Daniel had been quiet for a while. Now he said, "This is bigger than a property dispute." "Yes," Haley said. "These men have a system. They've run it multiple times. That means there are people protecting them inside the records offices, inside the courts, maybe inside law enforcement." He paused. "That means they have reach. That's why I can't do this alone," Haley said simply. She said it without embarrassment, without the cringing self-consciousness she had feared. She said it the way her father might have said it, factually, without apology, because it was true. Daniel looked at the vest still lying on the table between them. He picked it up, and he did something she didn't expect. He held it for a moment, like it was something he had been meaning to hold for a long time, like something had been put down wrong, and he was correcting it. Then he said it in front of her. "Your father was one of the most decent men I've known in this life," he said. "He left. He made a choice, and I respected it. But part of me always knew if he ever needed something, this family would be there." He met her eyes. "He's not here to need it, but you are. And you walked in here the same way he always did, straight in. No games, telling the truth." He paused. "That means something to us," Haley looked at the vest, at her father's name in fraying white thread. "He told me you were a man who kept his word," she said. "He was right," Daniel said. Rook pushed off the wall. "What do we do first?" "We find Raymond Chu," Dex said, "and we find out who else touched those documents." "And the men who ran Marcus off the road," said a voice from behind Haley. She turned to see a large man she hadn't noticed approach. Another vest, another title patch, watching her with a flat expression that she was beginning to understand. Was not hostility, but assessment. "We find out about that too." "I'd appreciate that," Haley said carefully. "We're not vigilantes," Daniel said to her, clearly and directly. "Whatever we find, we put it where it belongs. In front of the right people, with the right documentation. Your father left you that chain because he trusted us to be smart about this. We're going to be smart about it." She nodded. "That's all I wanted." Outside, the Arizona night was cooling toward the temperature it would stay at until dawn. Inside the Iron Horse Tavern, the jukebox came back on, and the conversations and the pool balls started cracking against each other again. And at a back table that had become the center of something, neither small nor simple, Dex was already on his phone looking up a notary named Raymond Chu. And Haley Carter was sitting in a biker bar with her father's vest on the table in front of her. And for the first time in 2 years, maybe for the first time in 5, she did not like she was standing at the edge of something alone. She felt like she was standing at the beginning of something. She didn't know yet what it was going to cost, or how far it was going to reach, or whose names were going to come out when they finally started pulling the right threads. She didn't know that what looked like a stolen repair shop was the visible edge of something that went down through layers she hadn't imagined yet. That the men who had taken her father's business had been doing this longer and to more people than even she had been able to trace. She didn't know that the man she had met in a hospital room, Marcus, her father's foreman with his arm in a sling, and his voice thin from pain medication, had whispered a name to her that she had written in the back of the blue binder in pencil. A name she hadn't been able to connect to anything yet. A name that Dex, at this very moment, was about to find in a corporate filing that linked it to both Robert Payne and to the Okafor case and to a county clerk's office in Maricopa, where documents had been certified and filed and accepted without question for 6 years. She didn't know any of that yet. She just knew she had walked through a door she had been afraid to open for 5 years. And the people on the other side of it had known her father's name, and they had looked at her like she was someone worth taking seriously. Her father had told her, "If you ever have nowhere else to go." She had always heard that as a last resort, a defeat. Sitting here now, with Dex's glasses back on his nose and his pen moving steadily across his legal pad, she was beginning to understand what her father had actually meant. He hadn't said, "Go there when you're beaten." He had said, "Go there when you're ready to stop fighting alone." Those were two completely different things. And Michael Carter, who had been stubborn and quiet and decent to the bone, had known his daughter well enough to know it would take her until she was absolutely certain there was no other way before she would ever accept that distinction. She reached out and put her hand on the vest, on her father's name. "Okay, Dad," she said softly, under her breath, under the jukebox and the pool balls, and the resumed conversations of 200 people who were now, in some way she didn't fully understand yet, on her side. "I'm here." Dex found Raymond Chu at 11:47 that same night. Not in person, not yet, but on paper, which for a man like Dex was almost the same thing. He had been working through the corporate filings for 40 minutes, cross-referencing the notary seal numbers against the state registry. And when he found it, he didn't say anything dramatic. He just set his pen down on the legal pad and said, "Haley, look at this." She leaned across the table. The document on top was a property transfer certification dated March 14th, filed in Maricopa County, bearing Raymond Chu's seal and signature. The document beneath it was a deed assignment, filed the same day in Pima County, different courthouse, 115 miles south, bearing the same seal. Same ink color, same signature loop on the C in Chu. "He can't be in both places," she said. "No," Dex said. "He cannot." He tapped the second document. "But look at the seal number. On the Maricopa filing, it ends in 447. On the Pima filing, 449, Haley said. Notary seals are issued individually. One seal per notary. Raymond Chu has one seal number, which means one of these documents was stamped with a seal that does not belong to Raymond Chu. Dex looked up at her over his glasses. Someone manufactured a second seal, duplicated his credentials, committed criminal fraud, not just once, but as a deliberate system, because you don't go to the trouble of making a fake notary seal unless you plan to use it more than once. Daniel had been listening from 2 seats over. How many times has it been used? Dex pulled the green binder, Haley's timeline binder, toward him and opened it to the section she had marked with a yellow tab. Based on what Haley has here, I can identify at minimum 6 documents across 3 cases that show the same anomaly. Different seal numbers on filings that should carry identical credentials. He paused. There may be more. We're only seeing what Haley was able to pull from public records. There are more, Haley said quietly. I know there are more. I just couldn't get to them. Rook, still leaning against the wall, said, so Payne and Sheldon have been running a document mill. Fake seals, fake signatures, real courthouse filings. That's federal territory. Potentially, yes, Dex said. Wire fraud, document forgery, interstate racketeering if the pattern crosses state lines. He looked at Haley. Does it? She reached across and flipped to page 61 of the blue binder. The Okafor family's welding business in Mesa, that's Maricopa County. My father's shop is in Pima. The woman in Scottsdale, her name is Patricia Enns. She lost her catering company 18 months ago, also Maricopa. She paused. But I found a 4th case last month. A retired veteran named Gerald Hauser. He had a hardware store in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Same law firm's signature on the transfer documents. Same corporate buyer, a subsidiary of Consolidated Asset Holdings that operates under a different name in New Mexico. The table went quiet. New Mexico is a different federal district, Dex said. I know, Haley said. He stared at her. You've been building a multi-state fraud case. Alone for 2 years. I've been trying to, she said. I kept hitting walls I couldn't get through by myself. Daniel stood up slowly. He walked to the bar, said something to the man behind it, and came back with 2 glasses of water, one of which he set in front of Haley without asking. It was such an ordinary gesture that it almost undid her, because no one had done anything that simple and considerate for her in longer than she could easily remember. Drink, he said. You look like you haven't slept in 3 days. 2, she said. Drink anyway. She drank. He sat back down and looked at Dex. Can we get to Raymond Chu directly? I have a home address from the state notary registry, Dex said. He may not know his credentials have been duplicated. If he's clean, if he's a victim of this too, he becomes a witness, a credible one. And if he's not clean, Rook asked, then we find that out too, Dex said evenly, and we use it differently. Haley set down her water glass. I need to tell you something I haven't told anyone yet. She looked around the table. Daniel, Dex, Rook, the large man whose road name she'd learned was Boone, and 2 others who had pulled chairs over at some point in the last hour without anyone formally inviting them. Marcus, my father's foreman, the man who was run off the road. He called me from the hospital. His arm was broken, he was on pain medication, and the first thing he said when I picked up the phone was not that he was hurt. It was a name. She paused. He said, Haley, the name is Garrett Wills. Write it down. Don't say it out loud until you know who you're talking to. Nobody at the table spoke. I wrote it down, she said. I've been sitting on it for 3 days because I didn't know who I could trust with it. I still don't know exactly what it connects to. But Marcus said, Garrett Wills is the reason the paperwork always gets through. He said Wills is inside. She looked at Daniel directly. Inside the system. Somewhere official. Dex had his pen moving before she finished the sentence. Garrett Wills, he said. Spell it, she spelled it. Give me 20 minutes, he said. He didn't take 20 minutes. He took 11. And when he looked up from his phone, the expression on his face was the controlled, careful look of someone who has found exactly what they were afraid of finding. Garrett Wills, he said slowly, is a senior title examiner for the Pima County Recorder's Office. He has been in that position for 9 years. His job is to review property transfer documents for accuracy before they are accepted and filed. He set his phone face down on the table. He is the person who approved the transfer documents on your false property. The silence at the table was different this time. Denser. He's the inside man, Rook said. He's been approving fraudulent documents for years, Dex said. Possibly selectively, not everything, just the specific cases that come through from Payne and Sheldon's network. Enough to stay below the radar. Enough to not look like a pattern unless someone is specifically looking for one. Haley felt something cold move through her that was not fear exactly. It was the particular chill of understanding how large something is, how deep the roots go when you have been digging at the surface for 2 years and the ground finally gives way to reveal the whole system underneath. Marcus figured this out, she said. That's why they ran him off the road. Yes, Daniel said. There was something in his voice now that had not been there at the beginning of the night, not anger exactly, but the quality of something being decided. He got too close and they couldn't afford to let him get to you with it. He got to me anyway, Haley said, because Marcus Webb is the most stubborn man I've ever met besides my father. Her voice caught on the last word, and she let it, just for a second, before she steadied it. He called me from the hospital bed, broken arm, cracked ribs, and the first thing he did was give me the name. Boone, who had barely spoken all night, said quietly, "That's a loyal man." "He was my father's right hand for 12 years, Haley said. "He's family." Daniel looked at her. "We're going to need to talk to him. He's at Banner University Medical. He'll talk to you." She stopped, almost smiled. He was actually relieved when I told him I was coming here tonight. He's the one who reminded me that I had the chain. I had it in a box in my closet, and I had stopped thinking about it because I had been trying so hard to handle everything myself. She paused. He said, "Haley, your father didn't leave you that chain so you could leave it in a box." "Smart man," Rook said. "Very," she agreed. Dex was writing again, steady and fast. "Here is what I think we need to do. I want to approach Raymond Chu first tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest. I want to determine whether he knows his credentials have been cloned. If he doesn't, we bring him in as a cooperating witness, and we start building from the bottom up. At the same time, I want someone to run a complete employment history on Garrett Wills, how he got the job, who recommended him, whether there are any financial anomalies in his record. People in his position who take bribes usually make mistakes somewhere. A new car, a vacation that doesn't fit the salary. I can do the backgrounds," said one of the men who had pulled up a chair. He hadn't introduced himself by his road name or his real one, but he had been taking photos of specific pages in the blue binder with his phone for the past 30 minutes. "I have contacts at 2 credit bureaus and a former colleague at the county assessor's office." Haley looked at him. "Who are you?" "My name is Pete," he said simply. "I was a paralegal for 16 years before I decided I was done with offices." She looked around the table. A fraud investigator, a paralegal, a man with credit bureau contacts. She thought about the assumptions she had carried through the door of the Iron Horse Tavern, the assumptions that 5 years of tabloid headlines and public mythology had built up, the image of what sat on the other side of a biker bar door. She thought about how completely and thoroughly wrong she had been. "My father really did know what he was doing," she said, more to herself than anyone. Daniel heard it. "He always did," he said. That was Michael. He saw people, not categories. It was close to 1 in the morning when the first real problem arrived. Haley's phone rang. Unknown number, she almost didn't answer it, but something made her pick up. She held up a hand for quiet at the table and answered, "Miss Carter." The voice on the other end was male, measured, professional. The voice of someone who practiced sounding reasonable. "My name isn't important. I'm calling because some people I work with have become aware that you've been spending time looking into certain business matters that don't really concern you anymore. The property in question was legally transferred. The documentation has been reviewed and accepted by the appropriate authorities." Haley kept her voice flat. "I see. We'd hate for this to become an uncomfortable situation for you," the voice continued. or for anyone close to you. The gentleman who had the accident outside Tempe, that was an unfortunate situation. Roads in Arizona can be unpredictable. Her hand tightened on the phone so hard she felt the case creak. Across the table, Daniel was watching her face. She held up one finger weight and kept her voice completely neutral. "That's very thoughtful of you to be concerned," she said. "We just want everyone to be safe," the voice said. "And sometimes the smartest thing a person can do is recognize when they've reached the end of a road." "I'll keep that in mind," Haley said. "Thank you for calling." She ended the call, set the phone face up on the table. Her hand was shaking slightly, not from fear. She understood after a moment, but from the specific rage that comes from being spoken to like, "You are small," like you can be frightened back into your corner with the right combination of politeness and threat. "They know I'm digging," she said. "Who called?" Daniel asked. They didn't give a name, but they referenced Marcus's accident as an unpredictable road. She looked at him steadily. "They know Marcus didn't just randomly crash. They know what happened, and they just told me they know. They're not even pretending anymore." Rook pushed off the wall. "They're escalating. Or they're panicking," Dex said, and his voice was careful and precise, "because something we've found tonight is closer to the truth than they expected anyone to get. They wouldn't be making calls at 1 in the morning if they felt safe." "Can you trace the number?" Haley asked. "Probably a burner," Pete said, already typing on his phone. "But the call itself is evidence. You need to document it. Time, content, exact words as close as you can remember them." He slid his legal pad across the table to her. She wrote it down, every word she could recall in sequence. It took 3 minutes. When she looked up, Daniel was watching her with something in his expression that she had seen once before, the same look he had given her when she set down the 3 binders. The look of someone recalibrating an assessment. "You're not scared," he said. "I'm furious," she said. "That's different." "It is different," he agreed. She pushed the legal pad back to Pete. "What do I do about the phone call?" "Nothing tonight," Dex said. "Tomorrow, you go to a different law firm, not the one who took your retainer and went quiet. A different one. You walk in with the documentation we're assembling, and you tell them about this phone call. That call, if they made it from anything traceable, is witness intimidation. That's criminal. And it changes the landscape of who law enforcement can't ignore." "I know a lawyer," Daniel said. "Her name is Sandra Reeves. She does not back down." He pulled out his own phone. "I'm going to text her right now and tell her she's getting a call in the morning." "It's 1 in the morning," Haley said. "Sandra doesn't sleep much," Daniel said. He was already typing. Haley looked at the table, at her binders, at Dex's legal pad covered in notes, at the photograph of the double-sealed documents that Pete had taken and was already working with, at her father's vest, still lost lying where Daniel had placed it between them, the white thread of the name catching the lamplight. She thought about what she had believed when she drove here. She had believed she was going to walk into a room full of strangers and ask for something and probably be told no, and that no would be the last door closing, and she would have to find some other way to keep fighting that she hadn't thought of yet. She had believed that asking for help was the moment you admitted defeat. She understood now, in the way you sometimes understand things all at once, without warning, that this had never been about defeat. Her father hadn't left her the chain as a last resort. He had left it as a key to a room full of people who had specific, real, concrete capabilities that she did not have alone, and who had known Michael Carter and loved him in the uncomplicated way that people love someone who is simply, consistently, genuinely good. She had kept the key in a box in her closet for 5 years because she had believed that using it meant she had failed. What she understood now was that using it meant she had been paying attention. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize, but the message read, "This is Sandra Reeves. Daniel Walker just texted me. Send me everything you have. I'll read it tonight. Call me at 8 a.m. Haley stared at the text. Then she looked up at Daniel. "She's already awake," she said. "I told you," he said. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Dex found Raymond Chu's personal email address in a professional association directory the Arizona Notary Public Association, which maintained a member contact list for exactly the kind of ordinary professional communication that Raymond Chu had never imagined anyone would trace back to a fraud investigation. Dex drafted a brief, careful message, not accusatory, not alarmist, identifying himself by his former professional credentials and asking for a conversation about documents bearing Chu's credentials that had come to their attention. He showed it to Haley before he sent it. "Is that too vague?" she asked. "It needs to be vague," he said. "If he's involved, vague gives us nothing to lose. If he's clean, vague keeps him from panicking before we can talk to him." She read it again. "Send it." He sent it. At 2:15, Raymond Chu replied. That was the first thing that surprised everyone at the table, not that he replied, but how fast he replied, which suggested he had been awake and at his computer at 2 in the morning, which was itself a kind of data point. The reply was 4 sentences long. "I have been aware for approximately 8 months that my credentials may have been compromised. I have been afraid to report it because I don't know who I can trust inside the system. I have documentation. When and where can we meet?" Haley read it over Dex's shoulder. She read it twice. Then she straightened up and looked at Daniel. "He's been sitting on this for 8 months, she said. "He's been scared." "He's not scared anymore," Rook said, reading from across the table. "Look at the reply time. He's been waiting for someone to find him." Dex was already typing a response. "Meeting location. Tomorrow morning, neutral ground. A diner 3 miles from the Iron Horse that Daniel confirmed was owned by someone trustworthy. 9 a.m. Bring everything." He sent it. Chu replied in under 2 minutes, "I'll be there." Boone crossed his arms. "One night," he said. He said it quietly, almost to himself. "She walked in here one night and we've got a county insider, a notary witness, and a phone call. That's witness intimidation on record." "She had the work already done," Dex said, without looking up from his notes. "She brought us 2 years of evidence. We're just following the threads she laid." Haley said nothing. She was looking at her father's vest again. She was thinking about the way he used to fix things methodically, without drama, starting from the problem, and working outward until he understood the whole system. He had taught her that when she was 12, standing beside him in the shop while he diagnosed an engine problem that 3 other mechanics had missed. "Don't guess," he had told her. "Follow the parts. Every machine tells you what's wrong with it if you learn how to listen." She had been following the parts for 2 years. She had been listening to a machine that was broken in ways that went deeper than she could see alone. Tonight, for the first time, she had enough people in the room who could hear the same things she was hearing. At 2:40 in the morning, Dex put down his pen and said, "I want to look at the Hauser case, the New Mexico one. If the same notary seal anomaly appears in Albuquerque filings, we're looking at a formal racketeering pattern. That changes what federal resources are available and who has jurisdiction." He looked at Haley. "Do you have the Hauser documents here?" "In the green binder," she said. Section 4, he opened it. Read for 6 minutes in silence. Then he said, without looking up, "The seal is there. Slightly different number again, 451. 3 different seal numbers for one notary." He closed the binder gently. "The way you close something important. They ran this across state lines. This is a federal RICO case." Nobody at the table spoke for a moment. "RICO," Rook said finally. "Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations," Pete said, "for no one's benefit in particular. Minimum sentencing starts at 20 years. Haley Carter sat very still in a biker bar at 2:45 in the morning with her dead father's vest on the table in front of her, and she understood with a clarity that felt almost physical, like something shifting in her chest, that what she had walked into tonight was not a conversation. It was not a request. It was not even a last resort. It was the beginning of the end of Robert Payne and Victor Sheldon. She didn't say that out loud. It felt too large to say out loud at 2:45 in the morning when the work was barely started and the people who had made that intimidation call were still out there, and Marcus was still in a hospital bed, and Sandra Reeves was awake somewhere reading documents on a screen. But she felt it. Solid and factual. The way her father had always taught her to feel things that were true not as hope, not as wish, but as a structural reality that the evidence supported. She reached across the table and put her hand on her father's vest. On his name. "What time do we need to be at the diner?" she asked. 8:30, Dex said. "Give us time to get settled before Chu arrives. I'll be there," she said. Daniel looked at her. "You should sleep." "So should you," she said. The corner of his mouth moved, probably. He paused. "Your father used to say rest is a weapon. You can't fight tired." She looked at him. "He said that to me, too. Every time I stayed up late doing homework." She picked up the vest, folded it carefully. The way something earned is folded with attention, with respect. "I'll sleep in my car in the parking lot. I don't want to drive 40 minutes and come back in 5 hours." Daniel started to say something she could see it forming. The offer, the spare room or the couch, or wherever people ended up in a place like this. She shook her head before he got it out. "I'm fine," she said. "I've been fine in worse places." He looked at her for a moment, with that look again reassessing, recalculating. Then he nodded. 8:30, he said. "Don't be late." "I'm never late," Haley said. She walked out of the Iron Horse Tavern at 2:55 in the morning, carrying her father's vest under her arm and a phone full of notes and a text from a lawyer named Sandra Reeves, who didn't sleep much. She got into her car. She reclined the seat. She set the vest on the passenger seat beside her, and she looked the ceiling of her car, and she breathed. The men who had called her tonight thought they were closing a door. She looked at her father's name on the vest in the faint light from the parking lot. They had no idea what they had just opened. She slept 3 hours in that car and woke up before her alarm. Not because she was rested, because her brain had kept running while the rest of her shut down, and somewhere around 5:30 in the morning, it had finished processing something and jolted her, awake with the particular urgency of a thought that refused to wait. She sat up, reached for her phone, and stared at the note she had typed the night before the verbatim transcript of the intimidation call. She read it 3 times. Then she read it a 4th time, slowly, the way Dex had taught her without meaning to, by watching him read documents, not for information, but for structure. For what the words chose not to say. They hadn't threatened her directly. They had referenced Marcus. They had called his deliberate accident an unpredictable road, and they had done it in a tone that assumed she would understand the implication without forcing them to say it plainly. That was lawyered language. That was the kind of phrasing a person uses when they have been told, by someone who knows the law, exactly how far they can go before a recorded conversation becomes criminal evidence, which meant someone in Payne and Sheldon's network was careful enough to worry about recorded conversations, which meant they were afraid of exactly the kind of case that Dex had spent the previous night beginning to build. She called Sandra Reeves at 7:58. The lawyer picked up on the second ring. "Haley Carter," Sandra said. Not a question. The voice of a woman who had already read everything and formed opinions. "I've been through the files you sent. All of them. Already I told you. Daniel said you'd be calling at 8. I had 2 hours. A pause. Not the pause of someone gathering thoughts, but the pause of someone choosing the right starting point from too many options. "Tell me about the phone call last night." "Everything," Haley told her. Word for word. From the opening, "My name isn't important," all the way through the road in Arizona can be unpredictable, and the deliberate, clinical politeness of the sign-off. Sandra listened without interrupting. When Haley finished, there was a silence of about 4 seconds. "That call was made by someone who has done this before," Sandra said. "The language is too calibrated. They know the line between implied threat and explicit threat, and they stayed just behind it. But the reference to Marcus Webb's accident, to a specific incident that was publicly reported as a road accident, that crosses into territory we can work with, especially combined with the timing. You had been inside the Iron Horse for hours. Whoever made that call was monitoring you." "They're watching me," Haley said. "Or watching the bar," Sandra said. "Either way, it tells us they have surveillance capability on you. And that is its own category of problem and its own category of evidence." Another pause. "I'm going to need the original phone you received the call on." Don't wipe it. Don't reset it. Don't let anyone else touch it. Can you bring it to the diner? Yes. Good. And Haley, I want you to understand something before we sit down together. What you've assembled in these documents is genuinely remarkable for someone working alone. But it also means that when we go forward from here, the people you've been tracing are going to respond. Not with phone calls, with lawyers, with motions to suppress and counter filings and public statements designed to make you look like a grieving daughter who can't accept a legal business transaction. Her voice was even not unkind. I need to know you understand. That I understand it, Haley said. Are you ready for it? Haley looked at her father's vest on the passenger seat, at the name in fraying white thread. I've been ready for it for 2 years, she said. I just didn't have the right people standing with me. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Daniel said you were Michael Carter's daughter. Something had shifted in Sandra's voice, slightly warmer, not softer but more direct. I knew your father. Not well. But he fixed my bike 3 times and he never charged me full price and he never let me leave without making sure whatever had gone wrong was genuinely fixed and not just patched. A brief pause. He was an honest man in a world that doesn't reward honesty enough. I'll see you at 8:30. The call ended. Haley put the car in gear. Raymond Chu was already at the diner when they arrived. He was sitting alone at a corner booth, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug. And the first thing Haley noticed was that he looked like a man who had been afraid for a very long time and was both relieved and terrified to stop carrying it alone. He was in his mid-40s, careful looking. The kind of person whose professional life depended on precision and whose current expression said that precision had become a burden he hadn't expected. Daniel slid into the seat across from him. Dex sat beside Daniel. Haley took the end of the booth. Sandra arrived 3 minutes later, set her bag on the table, and looked at Chu with an expression that was simultaneously reassuring and absolutely not taking any nonsense. Mr. Chu, Sandra said, thank you for coming. Nobody here is going to hurt you, and nothing you say in this conversation is admissible without your consent. You're not a suspect. If what you've told us by email is accurate, you're a victim. So, let's start there. Tell us what happened. Chu exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 8 months. About 14 months ago, he said, I was auditing my professional records, something I do quarterly, just to make sure everything is in order. I found a document reference number associated with my seal that I did not recognize. A property transfer in Pima County. I pulled the filing and my signature was on it, but I did not sign it. He stopped. His hands tightened around the mug. I have never worked in Pima County. My practice is entirely in Maricopa. I have never certified a document in Pima County in my professional career. What did you do when you found it? Dex asked. I panicked, Chu said, without embarrassment. I knew immediately what it meant. Someone had duplicated my credentials. But when I started looking into how to report it, I realized the document had already been accepted by the Pima County Recorder's Office and processed by a senior examiner there. Filed certified complete. And the name on that examiner's approval, he paused. He looked at his coffee. Garrett Wills. Haley felt the air go out of the table. You knew the name, Daniel said. I knew of him, Chu said. In notary circles, professional circles, there were whispers. Nothing I could put my hands on. But the kind of whispers that make you careful about who you talk to. He looked up. When I saw Wills's name on the approval, I understood that reporting this through normal channels was not safe. Because whoever was running this had someone inside the approval process, which meant reporting it through the approval process was reporting it directly to them. So you went quiet, Sandra said. Not accusatory. Understanding I went quiet, he confirmed. I kept a copy of everything, every document I found, every filing reference number that appeared against my credentials without my knowledge. I have been building a file for 14 months. He reached into the bag beside him and put a manila envelope on the table. Thick, this is it. Sandra picked it up, did not open it. Looked at Chu. How many documents? 17, he said. Across 4 counties. Maricopa, Pima, Yavapai, and Santa Cruz. And I believe there are more in New Mexico and Colorado, but I cannot access out-of-state records from my position. New Mexico we know about, Dex said. He and Haley exchanged a look. Colorado is new. Chu nodded. I found a corporate filing reference that suggested Colorado Activity, a subsidiary company connected to Consolidated Asset Holdings that had a registered agent address in Denver. I couldn't trace it further. Sandra set the envelope down and looked at Haley. Your 2 years of work just became a 17-count document fraud record with a corroborating victim witness and a Colorado thread. She said it calmly, the way surgeons speak in operating rooms, not without feeling, but with the feeling completely in service of the work. This is no longer a civil case. This is a criminal investigation. What does that mean for me? Haley asked. It means we go to the FBI, Sandra said. Not local law enforcement, not the county sheriff, not the Arizona AG's office, because we have documented evidence that at least one insider in the county recording system is compromised. And we have no way of knowing how far that extends. We go federal. Today, Rook, who had been sitting at the next booth over with Boone, close enough to hear, positioned to be visible as a deterrent, leaned over. Today. The phone call last night changed the calculus, Sandra said, without turning around. She had clearly already accounted for everyone in the room. They know Haley is close. They've already used violence once. We don't have the luxury of taking another week to build the file. We go with what we have, which is already substantial, and we let the federal investigators access the records we can't get to ourselves. She looked at Haley. Are you ready for this to become very public and very fast? I've been ready since they ran Marcus off the road, Haley said. Chu had been quiet through the exchange, watching. Now he said, I want to cooperate fully. I want to go on record. I've been afraid for 14 months, and I am done being afraid. He paused. There are other people out there who lost things to these men. Their businesses, their parents' businesses. I've been sitting on information that could have helped them. His voice tightened. That stops today. Daniel looked at him with the expression he used when he decided someone was trustworthy. You didn't know how to get the information somewhere safe, he said. That's not the same as not caring. Maybe Chu said. But I'm here now. They spent 40 minutes at that diner, going through Chu's envelope document by document. Sandra organized. Dex cross-referenced against Haley's binders, and Pete, who had shown up 10 minutes after they arrived, apparently having not slept at all, began building a master timeline that merged Chu's 14 months of records with Haley's 2 years of work. The picture that emerged was larger and more systematic than anything Haley had imagined alone. It was not just a handful of targeted families. It was a machine, a deliberate, organized multi-county operation that identified vulnerable properties, manufactured the legal documentation to transfer them, used wills to push the filings through official channels, and then laundered the assets through Consolidated Asset Holdings subsidiary network so quickly that by the time any heir understood what had happened, the paper trail was buried under 3 layers of legitimate-looking corporate structure. They've been doing this for at least 8 years, Pete said, looking up from the timeline. Possibly longer, but 8 years is what the documentation supports. 8 years. Haley did the math without wanting to. Her father had died 6 years ago. The shop had been taken 2 years after that, which meant Payne and Sheldon had been running this operation for at least 2 years before they ever touched anything connected to Michael Carter. They had been practiced. They had been confident. They had believed they were untouchable. How many families, she asked. Pete looked at the timeline. Conservatively, based on the filing references Chu identified and the cases you found. At minimum 14. Across 4 states, 14 families, 14 businesses, 14 people who had lost something a parent or a grandparent or a spouse had built, who had been told by lawyers and courts and clerks that the paperwork was in order, that there was nothing to dispute, that the transfer was legal and complete and final. 14 people who had probably done exactly what she had done, fought for a while, hit walls, run out of money and options and time, and eventually stopped. Or who were still fighting, alone, the way she had been before last night. She thought about Joseph Okafor in Mesa, about Patricia Enns in Scottsdale, about a veteran named Gerald Hauser in Albuquerque who had lost a hardware store he'd probably built with 30 years of his life. We need to contact all of them, she said. Sandra looked up. Yes, but carefully and after we've made the federal filing. If we contact the other victims first, it gives Payne and Sheldon's lawyers grounds to argue we were coordinating a harassment campaign. Federal filing first. Then we build the victim coalition. Agreed, Dex said. Agreed, Chu said. Haley nodded. She felt the shape of it, the sequence, the logic, the way the pieces had to move in order. Her father had taught her that too. Standing in the shop, you can't put the engine back together in any order you want. There's a sequence. Skip a step, and the whole thing comes apart when you start it up. Do it right, and it runs. Sandra was already on her phone, stepping away from the booth, speaking quietly to someone on the other end. Haley watched her without being able to hear the words, reading her posture, confident, efficient, the posture of someone who knew exactly who she was calling and what she was going to say when they picked up. She came back to the table after 7 minutes, sat down. I have a contact at the Phoenix FBI field office. She is expecting a call from me before noon with a preliminary case summary. If the documentation supports what I'm describing, and from what I've seen it, she'll open a formal inquiry and we'll have a case agent by end of week. She paused. It will move faster than a normal referral because of the witness intimidation call. That puts it in a different category. Rook had come to stand at the end of the table. He looked at Haley. You know, once this is filed, you're going to need to be careful. These people have already shown they're willing to use force. I know, Haley said. You shouldn't be alone, he said. It wasn't an offer exactly. It was a statement of fact that was also an offer. She started to say she was fine. She stopped. She thought about 5 years of I'm fine and closed doors and the chain sitting in a box in her closet because she had been too stubborn to admit she needed the key. She thought about Marcus in a hospital bed with a broken arm because he had been alone on that highway at the wrong moment. Okay, she said, I won't be alone. Rook nodded. That was all. He went back to his table. The case summary Sandra submitted to the FBI field office at 11:43 that morning was 22 pages long. It included Haley's 2 years of documentation, Chu's 14 months of records, the master timeline Pete had built, the verbatim transcript of the intimidation call, with the metadata from Haley's phone, and a preliminary analysis by Dex that laid out the document fraud pattern across 4 states. Sandra attached a cover letter that was precise and devastating and used the word racketeering 4 times in 3 paragraphs. The FBI agent called Sandra back at 2:17 in the afternoon. Sandra was sitting with Haley at the bar of the Iron Horse. They had moved back there after the diner because Sandra had decided, practically and without ceremony, that it was the safest place for Haley to be until they had a clearer picture of the surveillance risk. The call lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, Sandra put her phone down and looked at Haley. They're opening a preliminary inquiry, she said. They want the original documents originals, not copies, and they want to interview Chu and Marcus Webb within the next 48 hours. They're also running Garrett Wills's financials as of this afternoon. She paused, and they found something already. Haley went still. What? Your FBI contact did a routine check on the burner number that called you last night, Sandra said. Burners are disposable, but they're purchased somewhere, and they ping towers when they're active. The tower data from the call places the phone within a half-mile radius of the Iron Horse Tavern at the time it was made. The table went quiet. They were in the parking lot, Daniel said. Or close to it, Sandra said, within a half mile. They were watching the bar from the outside, and they made the call from there, which means they watched Haley walk in, and they waited for her to be inside, long enough to be invested, and then they called. She looked at Haley. They wanted to scare you while you were still far from home. Haley thought about sitting in the parking lot of the Iron Horse at 2:55 in the morning, reclined in her car seat, staring at the ceiling. About whoever had been out there in the dark, watching, having already made the call, probably watching, to see if she would come back out running. They misjudged, Daniel said. They did, Sandra said. She looked at Haley. They thought you were alone. They thought one phone call at 1 in the morning would be enough. They didn't account for what you walked into when you came through that door. Haley said nothing for a moment. She was looking at her father's vest, which she had kept with her all day on the seat beside her in the car, on the booth bench beside her in the diner, now on the bar stool to her left. She had not put it away. She was not going to put it away. She was thinking about what her father had known when he pressed the chain into her hands. He had not known Dex or Pete or Sandra Reeves. He had not known the specific people who would be in that room or what skills they would carry. But he had known the kind of people. He had known what this community was when it worked the way it was supposed to work, not the mythology, not the tabloid version, but the actual operational reality of people who kept their word, who protected what they cared about, who showed up. He had known, and he had trusted her to find her way here when she needed it, and he had known she would resist and take too long and try to do everything alone first, because she was his daughter, and that was exactly what he would have done. She almost laughed. She caught it before it came out, but the almost of it sat warm in her chest. Sandra, she said, when the FBI talks to Marcus, he's going to tell them about the name Garrett Wills and how he found it. They're going to want to know why he was looking. He was helping you investigate the loss of your father's business, Sandra said, which is completely legal. He's a witness and a victim of attempted violence. His cooperation is protected. I know, Haley said. I just want to make sure he knows that before they show up. He's been scared to talk since the accident. Can you call him? Yes. Do it now. She called Marcus from the bar stool. He answered on the third ring, his voice still thin from the pain medication, but alert, more alert than the last time she had called, which told her he was healing. She told him everything. The diner, choose Sandra. The FBI call. The tower data placing the burner phone in the Iron Horse parking lot. She talked for 6 minutes straight without stopping, because Marcus deserved to hear all of it, and she was not going to make him wait. When she finished, there was a pause. Then Marcus said, "Baby girl." He had called her that since she was 12. She had always pretended to hate it. Your daddy would be losing his mind right now in the best way. Her throat tightened. Yeah, she said. He would. Is it really going to work? Marcus asked. Not skeptical, genuinely asking. Way someone asks when they have been hurt badly enough that they need to hear someone say yes out loud. Yes, she said. And she said it the way her father used to state true things, not as reassurance, not as comfort, but as structural fact. It's going to, Marcus said. His voice settled. Okay, send whoever needs to talk to me. I'll be here. I'll send Sandra, Haley said. She'll prepare you before the FBI visit. Don't talk to anyone else until she gets there. Understood, Marcus said. And then, quietly, thank you for not getting up on this. She opened her mouth to say she hadn't done it for thanks. She stopped herself. Thank you for calling me from that hospital bed, she said instead. You gave me Wills's name when you were on pain meds with a broken arm. That's what broke this open. A short silence. Your father taught me, Marcus said simply, that the truth doesn't get easier to tell the longer you wait. She ended the call and set the phone down on the bar and stared at it for a moment. Boone appeared at her shoulder with a coffee mug, set it down in front of her without a word. She looked up at him. He had the flat assessment expression she had learned by now was actually a form of respect. Drink it, he said. You sound like you need it. She drank it. At 4 in the afternoon, Pete found the Colorado connection. It came through the Denver registered agent he had flagged that morning, a woman named Claire Donovan, who had been listed as the registered agent for 3 different consolidated asset holding subsidiaries over the past 6 years. Her name appeared when Pete ran it through a business registry database on 47 filings in Colorado. When he cross-referenced against property transfers in Denver and Jefferson counties, he found 6 that matched the pattern, same document anomalies, same filing speed, same legal firm signature, buried 3 layers deep in the corporate structure. 6 families in Colorado, 14 minimum in the Southwest. A network that was larger and more deliberate and more ruthless than anyone at the Iron Horse had imagined 20 hours ago when a 20-year-old woman had walked through the door with a chain and a vest. Pete put the Colorado report on the table in front of Dex and Sandra without saying anything. Sandra read it, looked at Pete. This needs to go to the FBI today. Before close of business, already formatting it, Pete said. Daniel had been standing nearby. He looked at the report, looked at Haley. 20 families, he said. At least, she said. You walked in here for one, he said. I walked in here for my father's, she said. But they're all connected. They were always connected. I just couldn't see the whole pattern from where I was standing. He was quiet for a moment. Michael used to say the same thing about engines, he said. Said you could never fix just one part in isolation. Said everything connected to everything else. And if you didn't understand the whole system, you'd fix one thing and break three others. She looked at him. He really did say that. All the time, Daniel said. And this time he did. Smile small. Real. The smile of a man remembering someone he had genuinely cared about. Drove me crazy. I'd come in with one problem and leave with a lecture about interconnected systems. He paused. He was always right. Haley picked up her father's vest. She held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the leather, the worn softness of something that had been through years of use and weather and life. She thought about what it had meant to carry this into the Iron Horse last night, the thing she had been certain would be a last resort. A moment of defeat, the thing she had put off for 5 years because she had believed asking for help meant she had lost. She thought about 20 families scattered across 4 states who had each fought alone, the same way she had, hitting the same walls, finding the same doors closed, losing the same exhausting battle against a system designed to make them feel like they had lost something that was legally, finally, irreversibly gone. She thought about the chain heavy, real, the chain her father had pressed into her hands with his last instruction, the chain she had kept in a box like a defeat instead of a key. She hadn't lost anything yet. Not really. And neither had any of them. The FBI case file was submitted at 4:58 in the afternoon. By 5:30, the case had been assigned to a senior special agent named Carla Reyes, who Sandra knew personally and described in 2 words, thorough and relentless. By 6 o'clock, Garrett Wills had been placed under informal financial review. And somewhere across Tucson, in an office or a car or a quiet room with good legal counsel, Robert Payne and Victor Sheldon were still confident, still certain that the young woman who had been causing them problems had hit her ceiling, that the phone call had worked, that she was alone and outgunned and would eventually stop. They had no idea what the last 24 hours had built. They had no idea that Raymond Chu had handed over 17 corroborating documents that morning. They had no idea that the chain they had assumed was just a girl's desperate last move had opened a door to something that was now moving on its own. Through channels they could not reach, with momentum they could not stop. Haley folded her father's vest one more time and held it in her lap and let herself feel, for one full unguarded minute, how much she wished he could see this. Then she straightened up, picked up her phone, looked at the next name. On the list, Sandra had given her the first of the other families they would begin contacting in the morning. Joseph Okafor, Mesa, Arizona. She started composing the message she would send him. You are not alone. We found the connection, and we are not done. Joseph Okafor called back 11 minutes after Haley sent the message. She had not expected that. She had expected a day. Maybe 2, expected the careful silence of someone who had been burned before and learned to treat strangers with suspicion, especially strangers who showed up claiming to have answers. She had prepared herself to wait. Instead, her phone rang at 7:18 in the evening while she was still sitting at the Iron Horse, and the voice on the other end was urgent and rough and trying very hard to sound calm. Who are you? Joseph said. How do you know about my family's business? And how do you know there's a connection? Not questions. Statements delivered in the tone of someone who had asked too many questions into empty air and was done being gentle about it. My name is Haley Carter, she said. My father was Michael Carter. He owned a repair shop in Tucson that was taken by the same men who took your family's welding operation. Robert Payne. Victor Sheldon, Consolidated Asset Holdings. She paused for exactly 1 second. And a senior title examiner named Garrett Wills, who has been approving their fraudulent documents through the Pima County Recorder's Office for years. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of someone who didn't recognize the names. The silence of someone who recognized all of them and was trying to process what it meant that a stranger had just said them out loud. Wills, Joseph said finally. His voice had changed. Quieter. I tried to pull the approval records on our transfer 2 years ago. That name kept appearing, and every time I tried to find out more about him, I hit a wall. I thought I was paranoid. You weren't paranoid, Haley said. You were right. And I have an FBI case file submitted this afternoon with documentation proving it. She stopped. Let that land. I also have a lawyer named Sandra Reeves, who is building a victim coalition. Your family's case is part of it. We need your documentation and we need your cooperation. And I need you to know, before you decide anything, that this is real and it is moving and you are not alone in it. Joseph was quiet for 5 seconds. She counted them. How long have you been working on this? He said. 2 years alone, she said. 48 hours with the right people. Another silence. Then a sound she had not expected, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Somewhere in the broken territory between relief and the particular grief of someone who has been fighting a thing for so long that the possibility of winning feels more disorienting than losing. My mother, he said. She died believing she had failed my father, that she had let his business go. She died thinking it was her fault. Haley closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her own father and what he had believed about the things he left behind. It wasn't her fault, she said, and we are going to prove that, officially, on the record. Tell me what you need, Joseph said. She told him. He listened without interrupting, asking 3 precise questions that told her he had spent 2 years of his own building a parallel file, not as systematic as hers, not as organized, but containing things she didn't have. Property assessment records from before the transfer. A correspondence chain between the Okafor family attorney and the law firm that processed the sale, in which the attorney had flagged irregularities, and then, abruptly, stopped responding entirely. And a different name, one Haley had never encountered that appeared in the Okafor transfer documents as a witness signature. Carl Briggs, Joseph said. He signed as a witness on 3 of the transfer documents. I could never find out who he was or what his connection to Payne was. Haley wrote it down, looked up at Dex, who was 2 seats away, mouthed the name. Dex had his pen moving before she finished mouthing it. We'll find him, she said to Joseph. Can you come to Tucson? When? Tomorrow morning. A pause. I'll drive tonight, Joseph said. I've been waiting 2 years to be in a room where someone was actually doing something. I'm not waiting until morning. He arrived at the Iron Horse at 11:15, a tall man in his early 30s with the exhausted, wire-tight energy of someone running on coffee and conviction. Daniel met him at the door, and Haley watched Joseph's face as he registered the room, the same assessment she had done 2 nights ago, the same recalibration as the room, failed to match whatever he had been expecting. He recovered faster than she had. He crossed the bar in a straight line and sat down and put a manila folder on the table and said, Carl Briggs. This is everything I have on him. Dex opened the folder. Read for 4 minutes. Then looked up with the expression. Haley was learning to read the controlled surprise look. The look of finding something significant in a place you expected to find nothing. Carl Briggs, Dex said, is a licensed real estate attorney in Scottsdale. I know, Joseph said, but he's not on any of the public filings connected to Consolidated Asset Holdings. He's 3 layers back. I could never prove the connection. You don't have to anymore, Dex said. He turned to Pete. Run Briggs against the Colorado subsidiaries. Pete was already typing. He stopped, looked at his screen. Carl Briggs is listed as legal counsel on 4 of the Denver subsidiary registrations. Under a slightly different professional designation, he uses his middle name in Colorado filings. Carl T. Briggs versus C. Thomas Briggs. Different enough to not flag an automated search. Same bar number. Sandra, who had stayed at the bar past 9 because she had apparently decided to treat the Iron Horse as her temporary office, walked over and looked at Pete's screen. "He's the architect," she said. It came out quiet and certain, the voice of someone who has just seen the load-bearing beam in a building and understood why all the walls are the way they are. "He's not just a witness. He designed the documentation system. He's the lawyer behind the fraud. And he's been invisible," Haley said. "Until Joseph walked into this room tonight with a folder," Dex said. He looked at Joseph Okafor with the specific respect of one precise person for another. "Where did you find the Briggs connection?" "My mother kept everything," Joseph said simply. "Every piece of paper that came to the house related to my father's business. When she died, I went through it all. There was a handwritten note, her handwriting, with Briggs's name and a phone number. She had called the number, and someone answered and hung up immediately. She wrote next to it, 'He knows something he's not telling.' She wrote it in Igbo." He paused, his jaw tightened. "My mother figured out more in her grief than the lawyers we hired ever did." The table was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of people who had nothing to say, but the quiet of people who understood they were in the presence of something that deserved a moment. "Her name," Daniel said. "What was her name?" Joseph said. "Grace Okafor." "Grace Okafor figured out Carl Briggs," Daniel said. He said it deliberately, the way names get said when they're being entered into a record that matters. That gets remembered. Joseph looked at him. Something shifted in his expression, not quite broken, but opened, the way a door opens when someone finally finds the right key. "She would have liked hearing that," he said. Haley looked at both of them and thought about inheritance, not the legal kind, not the kind that got stolen through fraudulent transfers and fake notary seals, but the real kind, the kind that was a mother who kept every piece of paper and wrote a name in her own language because she knew something was wrong. The kind that was a father who pressed a chain into his daughter's hands and said, "Bring this to them." The things people left behind that actually lasted. She came back to the table. "Sandra, if Briggs is the architect, if he designed the documentation system, then everything goes through him. Every fraudulent transfer in every state has his fingerprints on the legal structure." "Yes," Sandra said. "That means the FBI case just got significantly larger," Haley said. "It does," Sandra said. "And I need to update the case file tonight." She looked at her watch. It was 11:40. She looked like this fact was entirely irrelevant to her. "Pete, can you compile the Briggs connection documentation into a supplemental report?" "Give me an hour," Pete said. "You have 45 minutes, Sandra said. Pete made a sound that was not quite a complaint and started typing. What happened in the next 3 hours was the kind of sustained, focused work that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, people sitting at tables with phones and laptops and stacks of paper, cross-referencing and compiling and verifying the quiet machinery of evidence being built. But underneath the quiet was a current that everyone in the room could feel, the particular electricity of a case that has passed a threshold, that has gone from possible to certain, from complicated to clear. At 1:15 in the morning, Pete submitted the supplemental report to Sandra, who read it in 12 minutes and sent it to the FBI with a cover note that was 3 paragraphs and contained the phrase "organized legal conspiracy" 4 times. At 1:40, Sandra's FBI contact, Carla Reyes, sent a response that said, "Received. We're elevating this to a field investigation. Case agent assigned tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Do not contact Wills, Briggs, Payne, or Sheldon. We are moving on this." Sandra showed Haley the message. Haley read it twice. "We are moving on this," she said. "That's FBI language for "we're executing this fast," Sandra said. "Reyes doesn't send messages like that unless she means it." Haley set the phone down, looked at the table at Joseph Okafor, who was reading through Dex's master timeline with the focused intensity of someone seeing their own 2 years of private investigation confirmed and expanded and made real. At Dex, who was compiling a secondary file on Carl Briggs' professional history. At Pete, who had moved on without pausing to start pulling the Colorado subsidiary records into a format the FBI could search. At Daniel, who was sitting 2 chairs away drinking coffee and not saying much, but whose presence in the room was its own kind of infrastructure, the thing that held the shape of everything else. At her father's vest on the stool beside her, she was very tired. She was more awake than she had been in 2 years. Joseph looked up from the timeline. "This is everything I couldn't get to alone," he said. He said it without self-pity, just as fact, the resources, the connections, the ability to go federal without getting dismissed. He paused. "How did you find all of this?" "I didn't find all of it," Haley said. "I found enough of it to walk through a door. The rest of it was already in the room." He looked around the Iron Horse, at Daniel, at the men who had been moving in and out of the back area all evening, some of whom had contributed directly, and some of whom had simply been present in the way that presence creates safety. "Your father's people," he said. "My father's people," she agreed. "I didn't grow up thinking I would ever owe something like this to a room full of." He stopped, reconsidered the end of that sentence, started over. "My father would have walked in here and felt completely at home," he said instead. He didn't care about what things looked like. He cared about whether people kept their word. Then he would have fit right in, Daniel said from 2 chairs over, without looking up from his coffee. It was the kind of thing that should have been awkward, and wasn't, because the room had moved past the point where the categories mattered and arrived at the point where the work was the only thing that mattered, and in the work everyone had been exactly what they said they were. The next morning broke fast and hard. Haley was back at the Iron Horse by 7:30. She had gone to a motel this time, 4 hours of actual sleep in an actual bed, because Daniel had said rest is a weapon, and she had decided to stop arguing with her father's friends about things her father had also told her. She came in with coffee for the table and found Dex already there, already working, and the expression on his face when he looked up stopped her 3 steps inside the door. "What happened?" she said. "Garrett Wills didn't come into work this morning," Dex said. "Called in sick at 7 a.m. First sick day in 9 months. She set the coffees down. "He knows. Someone warned him," Dex said. "Which means there's a communication line between Payne or Sheldon or Briggs and Wills that activated last night. Which means they know the investigation is moving," she said. "They know something is moving," Dex said. "They may not know it's federal yet, but they know enough to tell Wills to go quiet." She pulled out her phone and called Sandra. Sandra picked up on the first ring. "I already heard," she said. "I called Reyes at 7:15. She's aware. They were already planning to move on Wills today. This accelerates the timeline, but it doesn't change the outcome." "Can he run?" Haley asked. "Where would he go?" Sandra said. "He's a county employee with a pension and a mortgage. People like Wills don't run. They wait and they hope, and they lawyer up." A pause. "The person I'd watch is Briggs. He has resources, and he's smart enough to know that if the documentation trail leads anywhere, it leads directly to him." "Should we?" "No," Sandra said firmly. "We do nothing. We let the FBI work. That is what we hired them for. A beat. I know it's hard. I know you want to move. But the moment we do anything that looks like interference, we give Briggs's defense attorney something to work with. We sit. We wait. We are available when Reyes calls." Haley paced the length of the bar and back. Sitting and waiting was the thing she was worst at. 2 years of sitting and waiting and watching the case go nowhere. She had earned a reflex against stillness that was going to be difficult to override now that things were actually moving. "Okay," she said. "I mean it," Sandra said. "I said okay," Haley said. She sat down. She drank her coffee. She lasted 22 minutes before something broke the waiting for her. Joseph came through the door at 8:10, moving fast, phone in hand, and the expression on his face was the same one Dex had worn when she walked in, the controlled alarm look, the look of information that required immediate sharing. "Patricia Enns called me," he said. He was slightly out of breath. "The woman in Scottsdale who lost the catering company. She got a visit this morning, early before 7. 2 men. They said they were from a title resolution company, and they wanted to discuss a voluntary settlement on the property. They offered her $40,000 to sign a release and agree not to pursue any legal claims." The table went completely still. A settlement offer, Dex said. This morning. Before 7 a.m., Joseph said. At her home address, which she has not made public. They know her home address, Sandra said. And she was in the room. Somehow she had come through the back. Haley hadn't heard her arrive. They knew her address. They knew to approach her this morning, and they did it before business hours when she would have less access to legal advice. Her voice was completely even and absolutely furious in the way that only certain lawyers can be furious channeled, directed working. That is witness tampering. That is overt. And it tells us exactly how scared they are right now. Did she sign anything? Haley asked immediately. No, Joseph said. She told them to get off her property. She called me because she found my number through a mutual contact who knew about the Okafor case. He paused. She said to tell you, whoever you are, that she has been waiting for something like this for 18 months, and she is not signing anything. Haley exhaled. Good. We need her number. Already have it, Joseph said. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Sandra was already on her phone, walking toward the back, her voice dropping into the rapid, precise cadence she used when she was delivering information that required action. Haley could hear fragments, witness tampering, this morning, Scottsdale, and then Sandra was through the back door, and the conversation was out of earshot. They're panicking, Rook said. He had materialized at the table the way he did present when needed, invisible between moments. Settlement offers at 7 a.m. at someone's home address. That's not a legal strategy. That's a fire someone is trying to put out before it spreads. It already spread, Haley said. They don't know how far yet, Dex said. He was writing, which means we have a window. Whatever they know about the investigation, it's not complete. There's a gap between what they know and what the FBI has. If we can keep them in that gap long enough for Reyes to, Sandra came back through the door. Reyes is moving today, she said. The witness tampering attempt on ends pushed the timeline forward. She's executing a document preservation order on the county recorder's office this morning, which means Wills cannot touch, move, or destroy anything in his office files, regardless of whether he's physically present. She stopped at the table, looked around at everyone, and she wants Haley and Joseph in the field office at noon. Haley looked at her. The FBI wants to see us. They want your original documentation and your first-hand accounts, Sandra said. This is standard. They need to hear it from you directly. It also gives them grounds to treat you as official cooperating witnesses, which provides you a level of legal protection that you currently don't have. She paused. Bring the vest. Haley looked at her. The vest? The chain and the vest, Sandra said. Your father's instructions are part of the chain of custody of this investigation. Why you came here, what you brought, what it means, that context matters. It tells the story of why a 20-year-old woman was the one who put this case together when a county employee with 9 years of tenure was burying it. She met Haley's eyes. Let them see the whole picture. At noon, Haley Carter walked into the Phoenix FBI field office carrying 3 binders, a manila envelope of supplementary documentation, and her father's leather vest folded over her arm. Joseph Okafor walked in beside her. Sandra Reeves walked 2 steps ahead of them like a ship cutting water. Special Agent Carla Reyes was a compact woman in her 40s with the attentive, unhurried manner of someone who had learned that the most important information usually arrived in the details other people skipped over. She shook Haley's hand. Look at the vest. Said nothing about it yet. Led them into a conference room where 2 other agents were already seated with laptops and legal pads. Miss Carter, Reyes said, let's start at the beginning. Your father pressed a chain into your hands the night before he died and told you to bring it somewhere if you ever ran out of road. Walk me through what happened between that moment and the moment you walked through the door of the Iron Horse Tavern. Haley told her. She had told the story before to Daniel, to Dex, in pieces and fragments over 2 days, but she had not told it in full, in sequence from the beginning. She told it now, all of it. The years after her father's death, the shop, the employees she had come to know, the work she had understood and loved because it was his and it was real. The notice from the law firm she had never heard of. the documents with her name on them that she had not signed, the 3 lawyers, and the one who disappeared, the 2 years of courthouse research and public records requests, and the slow assembly of a picture she could see but couldn't prove. The night she finally opened the box in her closet and took out the chain. She talked for 41 minutes without stopping. Reyes did not interrupt once. The other 2 agents took notes continuously. When Haley finished, Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at the vest. "May I?" she asked. Haley handed it across the table. Reyes held it the way Daniel had held it with attention, with the recognition that this was something that had been someone's before it was evidence. She looked at the name, turned it over, looked at the patches, set it on the table between them. "Your father built a 20-family fraud case," Reyes said, "without knowing he was doing it. He built it by raising a daughter who paid attention, who kept records, who didn't give up, and who finally asked for help from exactly the right people." She paused. "I've been in this office for 16 years. I have never had a case come to me this well organized from outside sources. I had a lot of time," Haley said. "You had a lot of discipline," Reyes corrected. "That's different." Joseph spoke for the next 30 minutes. Grace Okafor's handwritten notes, the Briggs name, the correspondence chain that showed their family attorney had flagged irregularities and then gone silent. Reyes's agents were writing constantly. One of them stepped out midway through to make a call. When he came back, he passed a note to Reyes, who read it without expression, set it down, and kept listening. When Joseph finished, Reyes looked at the note. Carl Briggs's office in Scottsdale was locked this morning by his assistant, who reported that Briggs called at 8 a.m. to say he had a family emergency and would be out of the office indefinitely. She looked up. "We have a federal hold on his passport as of 45 minutes ago." The room absorbed this. "He tried to run," Sandra said. "He tried," Reyes said. Haley thought about Briggs, about a man who had spent years building a system designed to be invisible, who had put his name 3 layers back from everything and used a different name in different states and believed that the legal complexity was sufficient camouflage. She thought about Grace Okafor writing a name in Igbo in the margins of her documents because she had noticed something that no one who was supposed to notice had noticed. She thought about Marcus Webb calling from a hospital bed with a broken arm. She thought about a box in a closet and a chain that had been waiting for 5 years. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Reyes said, "we work." She looked at Haley directly, not the way people had been looking at her for 2 years, not the dismissive assessment of someone evaluating whether she was worth their time, but the level serious look of a peer. "You stay available. You stay safe. You do not contact Payne, Sheldon, Briggs, or anyone connected to them. And you trust that what you put in front of us is enough to do what you couldn't do alone." She paused. "It is enough. I want you to know that clearly. What you built is enough." Haley held that for a moment. She had spent 2 years being told that what she had wasn't enough, not enough evidence, not enough documentation, not a strong enough case, not the right kind of complaint for the right kind of office. She had carried the not enough like weight, had learned to move with it because there was no other option. She set it down, quietly, without ceremony. Just released it the way you release something you've been gripping so long your hand has forgotten how to open. "Okay," she said. "One more thing," Reyes said. She looked at Haley's father's vest on the table between them. "The men who called you from the parking lot of the Iron Horse. The burner phone that pinged within a half-mile." She looked up. "We identified the device purchase location through cell tower triangulation and store security footage from 2 days before the call. The phone was purchased at a convenience store in Scottsdale at 2:15 p.m. Paid cash by a man whose face we have on camera." She slid a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize him?" Haley looked at the photograph. A man at a store counter, mid-40s, nondescript suit, looking slightly to the left of the camera. She shook her head. "I don't know him." Reyes nodded. "His name is Dennis Farrow. He is Robert Payne's personal assistant and has been for 11 years. She picked the photograph back up. "He made the call. which puts Payne directly in the chain of the witness intimidation, which means Payne is not just a white-collar fraud suspect. He is now facing federal intimidation charges. She paused. The walls just got significantly smaller. Sandra said, beside Haley, good. And it was. It was good. But what Haley felt in that moment was not exactly triumph. It was something quieter and more complicated. The feeling of something that has been wrong for a long time beginning to move toward right. Not arrived yet, not finished. But moving, she reached across the table and picked up her father's vest, folded it, held it in her lap. She thought about the night he had given her the chain. The way he had looked at her, like he was sorry for what he was leaving behind, and proud of who he was leaving it with, and afraid and peaceful and certain, all at the same time, all of those things at once in the same face, the way only dying people look when they've made peace with the truth of things. He had known this would take a long time. He had known she would fight it alone first, because she was his daughter. He had known there would come a night when the last door closed and the box came out of the closet. He had trusted that when that night came, she would walk through the right door. She had. Robert Payne got a call from his attorney at 4:17 that afternoon. The call lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, Payne made 2 more calls. Both went to voicemail. Victor Sheldon was not answering his phone. Carl Briggs's number had been disconnected. Payne sat in his office for a long time after that. Outside his window, Scottsdale was going about its ordinary business, completely unaware that 3 blocks away, in a federal field office, a case agent named Carla Reyes was signing the paperwork for search warrants on 4 addresses and a dozen corporate accounts. He had been so certain the young woman would stop. He had been so certain that the phone call, the access, the resources, the legal complexity, all of it combined, would be too much for someone working alone. He had been right about everything except the alone part. The search warrants executed at 6:15 the following morning. Haley heard about it from Sandra at 6:41 via a text message that said simply they moved. 4 locations simultaneously. Stay where you are. She was at the motel. She had been awake since 5:30, lying in the dark, running through the case the way she had been running through it for 2 years compulsively, checking the structure, looking for the gaps she had missed, the thing that would unravel it. Old habit. The habit of someone who had been fighting alone long enough that vigilance became indistinguishable from breathing. She read Sandra's text 4 times. Then she called her. Tell me, Haley said. Payne's office in Phoenix. Sheldon's residence in Paradise Valley. The Consolidated Asset Holdings, registered address in Scottsdale. And Carl Briggs's law office. Sandra's voice had the particular precision of someone reporting facts they have been waiting to report. Federal agents, simultaneous entry, 6:15 a.m. Document seizure, electronic device seizure, server imaging. The whole apparatus, a pause. Reyes called me at 6:30. She said they found physical document storage at Payne's office filing cabinets. Locked. Which means paper records that were never digitized and therefore never subject to the kind of electronic trail they thought they had managed. They kept paper records, Haley said. People always keep paper records, Sandra said. They tell themselves it's safer. No digital footprint. What they forget is that paper is permanent in a way that a hard drive isn't. You can't remotely wipe a filing cabinet. A brief pause. Reyes said the volume is substantial. They're going to need days to process it. And Will's administrative leave effective this morning. The county recorder's office was notified at 6:20. He can't access his office, his files, or the county database. Sandra's voice shifted slightly, still controlled, but with an undertone of satisfaction that she wasn't bothering to suppress entirely. He called his own lawyer at 6:45. We know that because the FBI was already monitoring his communications under the warrant. Haley sat on the edge of the motel bed and pressed her free hand flat against her knee to keep it still. Sandra. Is it enough? What they found this morning, is it enough to hold? It's enough to move forward, Sandra said carefully. Whether it's enough for conviction is a question that gets answered over months, not days. But what I can tell you is that Reyes is not a woman who executes 4 simultaneous warrants on a case she doesn't believe in. She's been doing this for 16 years, and she does not overextend. A deliberate pause. It's enough. Okay, Haley said. Go to the Iron Horse, Sandra said. I'll be there by 9. She was there by 8:45. Because she was Sandra Reeves, and she was apparently physically incapable of being late to anything. The Iron Horse at 8:45 in the morning was a different animal than the Iron Horse at midnight quieter. The particular quiet of a space that belongs to people who are used to late nights and take their mornings slowly. But Daniel was already at the back table with coffee, and Dex was there, and Rook, and when Haley walked in, they looked at her the way people look at someone they have been waiting for, not because she was late, but because she was the center of gravity of the thing they were all orbiting. She sat down. Somebody put coffee in front of her. She had stopped noting who did this. It had become simply something that happened, a form of care that this room offered without announcement or expectation of acknowledgement. You heard, Daniel said. Sandra called at 6:41, Haley said. Reyes is good, Dex said. I worked adjacent to a case she ran 8 years ago. She doesn't leave gaps. What happens now, Rook said. Not a question, more like a prompt, an opening for whatever Haley needed to say next. We wait, she said. And we keep building the victim documentation so that when this goes to prosecution, every family is on the record. We can't lose anyone in the complexity. She looked at Dex. I need to contact the remaining families. Gerald Hauser in Albuquerque and whoever else we haven't reached yet from Pete's Colorado list. Pete sent you the full list last night, Dex said. 6 Colorado families. He flagged 2 who still have active contact information, a couple in Denver named Rourke. Lost a landscaping business. And a woman in Colorado Springs named Diane Marsh. Lost a bookkeeping practice her husband had built. He paused. The others are harder to trace. Some of them may have moved. We find them, Haley said. All of them. Even if it takes time. Every family goes on the record. Daniel was watching her. He had been watching her since she walked in with the particular attention of someone who is tracking not just what a person is saying, but how they are carrying themselves. How are you? He asked. She looked at him. He asked it the way her father had asked it, not as a courtesy, as an actual question requiring an actual answer. I'm scared, she said. She said it simply, without softening it. I've been scared since the morning I found out the shop was gone, and I've been running on that fear for 2 years, and now things are actually moving, and the fear doesn't have anywhere to point anymore, and I'm not sure what to do with it. She paused. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Daniel said. Your father used to say, Dex said, not looking up from his notes, that the moment before something works is always the most frightening. Because you've lived with failure long enough that success starts to feel like the thing that can't be trusted. Haley looked at him. He said that to you? Several times, Dex said. Usually while we were waiting on a part to arrive. He'd get philosophical when he was waiting. He glanced up briefly. It annoyed me at the time. I've been stealing those lines for 20 years. She almost laughed. The almost of it felt good, felt like something returning to her that had been absent. Long enough she had stopped expecting it back. Joseph arrived at 9:15 with Patricia Enns. Haley had not met Patricia before, had only heard about her through the second-hand account of the men who had appeared at her door before 7 in the morning with a settlement offer and a pressure play. Patricia Enns was in her late 50s, compact and sharp-eyed, and she walked into the Iron Horse Tavern with the expression of someone who had decided some time ago that being frightened was no longer a productive use of her time. She looked at the room, looked at Daniel, looked at Haley. You're Michael Carter's daughter, she said. Yes, Haley said. Patricia sat down. My husband built that catering business from his dining room table in 1987. He died in 2019. I ran it for 2 years after he passed, and I was good at it. Her voice was matter-of-fact in the way people get when they have told a painful thing often enough that they have mastered the telling of it without the falling apart. Then the notices started. Then the lawyers I'd never heard of. Then a judge I'd never appeared before. Signed off on a transfer I had never agreed to, and I was out. She looked around the table. I filed 3 complaints in 18 months. Every one of them went nowhere. Last week I started thinking maybe I had imagined the whole thing, maybe the documents were real. Maybe I had signed something I didn't remember signing. She paused. And then 2 men showed up at my door before sunrise yesterday and offered me money to go away. And I understood that the only people who pay that kind of money that early in the morning are people who are afraid of something. They were afraid of this room, Rook said. Apparently, Patricia said. She put a folder on the table. Everything I have. 18 months of it. Sandra took the folder, started reading, said, without looking up, Patricia, the men who came to your door, did either of them give you a name? One of them said his name was Davis. No first name. He had a card. She reached into her jacket and put a business card on the table. I didn't give it back. Sandra looked at the card, looked at Haley. Dennis Farrow's associate, she said. Payne's Network. She picked up her phone, called Reyes's number, got voicemail, left a message that was 12 seconds long and contained the words additional witness, witness tampering, physical evidence in hand, call me. Reyes called back in 4 minutes. The conversation lasted 8. When Sandra put her phone down, she said, Patricia Enns is now an official cooperating witness. The business card goes to the FBI today. And Reyes says the paper records from Payne's office include client files plural, extensive that reference family names and case timelines in a way that she describes as damning. Her word. Sandra looked at the table. She also said Sheldon's personal attorney contacted the U.S. Attorney's office this morning. The table went still. Sheldon's lawyering up, Dex said. More than that, Sandra said. His attorney contacted the U.S. attorney to discuss cooperation. Nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. He's flipping, Rook said. He's attempting to, Sandra said. Which means Sheldon has decided that whatever loyalty existed between him and Payne is worth less than the deal he might get for cooperating. Which means he's scared. And which means the case Payne's attorney is going to try to build is about to get significantly more complicated for Payne. She paused. When a co-conspirator flips, the other co-conspirators tend to lose the ability to present a unified defense. Their stories have to diverge, and diverging stories create contradictions. And contradictions are what prosecutors build convictions on. Joseph said, quietly, it's falling apart for them. It's falling apart fast, Sandra said. Faster than I expected, honestly. The physical records from this morning combined with Sheldon's approach to the U.S. attorney, this is not a case that's going to spend 3 years in pre-trial motions. Reyes is going to push for indictment within 60 days. 60 days. Haley heard that and felt the timeline compress. 2 years of slow grinding work, and now 60 days. It should have felt fast. It felt like the right speed, like something that had been held back by a dam, finally moving at the rate it had always wanted to move. What about the families, she asked. The ones who lost businesses. The transfers, do they get reversed? Sandra was quiet for a moment. That's the harder question. Criminal conviction doesn't automatically reverse civil property transfers. Each family is going to need to file separately for restitution. Some of those cases will be straightforward. If the documents were demonstrably fraudulent, the transfers are void and the property reverts. Others are going to be complicated by subsequent transactions. If consolidated asset holdings sold properties onto third parties, those third parties may have legal protections depending on how much they knew. She looked at Haley directly. Your father's shop. The property has not been resold. It's been sitting in the consolidated asset holdings portfolio. That's one of the things Reyes flagged in this morning's records, which means your claim is cleaner than most. Haley absorbed this. The shop, the actual physical building where her father had spent 15 years, where Marcus had worked the floor for 12 of those, where she had learned to hand tools to mechanics before she learned long division. Sitting in a corporate portfolio like inventory. It's still there, she said. It's still there, Sandra confirmed. She looked at Daniel. He was looking back at her with an expression she had started to learn. The one that meant he was remembering Michael Carter and seeing him in her face at the same time. Layered like a double exposure. He kept it clean, she said, and she did not entirely mean the property. He always did, Daniel said. The hours that followed moved with the particular intensity of a situation that has reached the point where momentum is its own engine. Sandra coordinated the formal victim documentation for Patricia, sat with Joseph to review his materials for the U.S. Attorney's supplemental file, and made 7 calls in 4 hours that Haley only heard parts of fragments that told the story in pieces. The paper records from Payne's office were more extensive than initially reported, containing handwritten notes that referenced the will's arrangement explicitly. Briggs's passport hold had been confirmed and his assets frozen pending indictment review. The Colorado U.S. Attorney's Office had been contacted about the 6 Denver area cases and was coordinating with Reyes's team. Gerald Hauser called from Albuquerque at 11:30. He had gotten Haley's number from a contact she'd reached through Pete's network, the chain of connection that had been quietly building since the first night. Gerald was 71 years old, and he had a voice like gravel and slow water, and the first thing he said was, "Young lady, I have been trying to tell someone for 3 years that those documents were not right, and nobody would listen." "I know," Haley said. "I'm listening." "And so is the FBI." A silence. Then a sound that she recognized, that specific broken open sound she had heard from Joseph on the phone, the sound of someone who has been holding something heavy for so long that the offer of help feels almost unbearable. "My son thought I was losing my mind," Gerald said. "He thought grief had made me paranoid. He thought I was seeing fraud where there was just paperwork I didn't understand." "Your son was wrong," Haley said. "And in 60 days he'll know that." She spent 20 minutes with Gerald, getting the shape of his case, flagging the documents he still had, and giving him Sandra's number. When she ended the call, she sat for a moment with her hand on her father's vest, which had been on the table beside her all morning, like a fixed point. Boone appeared at her elbow. He put a sandwich on the table next to the vest and said nothing. She looked up at him. He jerked his chin slightly toward the sandwich, ate, and walked away. She ate. At 12:45, Sandra's phone rang in a way that made everyone at the table look up, not the ring itself, but Sandra's face when she saw the number. She answered, listened for 90 seconds, was speaking, said 3 words, "Thank you, Carla," ended the call. She set the phone down. "Garrett Wills just surrendered to the FBI field office," she said, "voluntarily, with his attorney. He is providing a full cooperation statement." The table erupted, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the particular release of people who have been holding tension for a very long time and have just been given a reason to let it go. Joseph put his face in his hands for a moment. Patricia made a sound that was half laugh, half something that had no clean name. Dex set his pen down with the deliberate care of someone marking a moment. Daniel looked at Haley. She was very still. Will's cooperating meant the inside mechanism of the entire operation was going to be laid open. Every document he had approved, every communication with Payne's network, every instance of the system functioning exactly as it had been designed. It meant the 20-plus families whose properties had passed through his desk were going to have their cases supported by the man who had processed the fraud. It meant Payne's last viable defense that the documents had passed legitimate review was gone. He was scared for 9 years, Haley said. Scared enough to stay in, Rook said. And scared enough to get out when he saw which way it was going, Dex said. He said it without judgment, with the analytical precision of someone cataloging a human reaction. People in Wills's position, they're not true believers. They took a deal at some point. Somebody offered them something and they said yes. And then they were in, and getting out felt more dangerous than staying in. Until the calculus changes. The calculus changed, Sandra said simply. Because of what's in that table, Boone said, from across the room. He was looking at Haley's binders, at Dex's legal pads, at the accumulated physical evidence of 2 years of one person's refusal to accept that the doors were all closed. Haley looked at her father's vest. She reached out and put her hand on it, palm flat, feeling the worn leather under her fingers. She was trying to locate what she felt, trying to find the word for it, and for a moment she couldn't. It was too compound, too layered, too much at once to fit into a single thing. Then she found it, vindicated. Not herself, her father. Michael Carter, who had spent 15 years being the most honest mechanic in Tucson, and who had kept his books clean and paid his employees fairly and fixed Sandra Reeves's bike 3 times without overcharging and had died trusting that the world was basically navigable if you did right by people. Michael Carter, who had been robbed in death by men who counted on the dead to not be able to fight back. He had been right. The world was navigable. You just sometimes needed the right people to navigate it with. Marcus called at 2 in the afternoon. His voice was stronger than it had been. The pain medication was stepping down. And underneath it was the voice she remembered from the shop, steady and deliberate. Sandra's associate came by this morning, he said. Prepared me for the FBI interview. They're coming tomorrow. Are you ready? Haley asked. I've been ready since the hospital, he said. I've been ready since I found Wills's name. I've been ready since he stopped. Since they ran me off that road thinking it would stop something. I need them to know it didn't stop anything. I need that on the record. It will be, she said. Sandra will make sure. Haley, his voice dropped. The shop. Sandra told me it hasn't been resold. I know. If you get it back, he started. When, she said, a pause. When you get it back. I want to come back to work. His voice was very quiet. I know it's a long time from now. I know there's a lot between now and then. But I want you to know that's where I want to be. I want to go back to the place your father built and do the work he taught me to do. He paused again. I think I'd like to help you run it. She pressed her free hand to her mouth for a moment. Let it be what it was for just a second before she steadied. There's nobody I'd rather have, she said. The afternoon moved through its hours. Sandra drafted the formal victim coalition, filing a consolidated document that named all 23 families they had identified, attached the supporting documentation, and formally requested that the court consider unified restitution proceedings rather than forcing each family to file separately. It was 48 pages. She had it done by 4 p.m. At 4:30, a paralegal from Reyes's team arrived at the Iron Horse, a young woman carrying a legal envelope who looked slightly overwhelmed by the room she had walked into and recovered quickly. She handed the envelope to Sandra, who signed for it, opened it, and read the top page. Formal indictment has been filed, Sandra said. Robert Payne, Victor Sheldon, Carl Brigg, and Garrett Wills. Federal charges: wire fraud, document fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness intimidation, and RICO. She looked at the page. Arraignment is scheduled for next Friday. Patricia N. said, from across the table, is this real? Is this actually happening? It's happening, Sandra said. Daniel stood up. He went to the bar and said something to the man behind it. And a minute later, there were glasses going around the table, not alcohol for everyone. Just something in a glass, the gesture of it. He handed one to Haley last. To Michael Carter, he said. She looked at him. She looked at the glass. She looked around the table at Dex with his legal pads, at Pete with his laptop, at Rook and Boone, who had been present through every hour of this, Joseph and Patricia, who had come through their own years of fighting and arrived here tonight, at Sandra, who had made 7 calls and drafted 48 pages and never once suggested that what they were doing might be too complicated or too slow or too much. To Michael Carter, she said. She drank. The room was quiet for a moment, not the silence of nothing happening, but the silence of something having happened. Something real and large that deserved a moment to breathe before the next thing began. Then Dex put his glass down and picked up his pen and said, the restitution filings for the Colorado families are going to need to go through the Denver Federal District. I want to start those tonight. And the work resumed. Because it was not done yet. The indictment was not the end. It was the structure that the rest had to be built inside. The families needed their properties back. The records needed to be corrected. The 23 cases needed to be seen individually, not just as aggregate evidence in a federal prosecution, but as 23 specific people who had lost specific things that had meant specific things to them and deserved to have those things returned with full acknowledgement of what had been taken. Haley was the one who kept saying that. Every time the conversation moved toward the prosecution, she redirected it, the families. The families first. The prosecution is the FBI's job. Returning what was stolen, that's ours. At 7 in the evening, when the room had been going for almost 12 hours straight, Daniel came and sat beside her. Not at the table in the chair next to her, close enough to talk without the table between them. "You need to stop," he said. "I'm fine," she said. "I know you are," he said. "I'm saying stop anyway." He paused. "Not forever. Not even for long. But there's a thing that happens when you've been running hard enough. For long enough, you start to believe that stopping, even for a minute, will undo everything. Like the whole structure depends on you, personally staying in motion." He looked at her. "Your father did this. Exact same thing. Run until he dropped and then feel guilty about dropping." "Did you tell him to stop?" she asked. "Many times," Daniel said. "He almost never listened." "Did he ever?" "Sometimes, when the right person asked." He paused. "I'm not saying you're like him in every way, but you are like him in the ways that matter, and also in the ways that will burn you out if you let them." He said it with the directness she had come to understand was not harshness, it was respect. It was how this man talked to people he took seriously. "Go back to the motel. Sleep. The case will still be here in the morning and you will be more useful to it having slept." She looked at him for a long moment. At the silver threading his beard, at the lines in his face, at the expression behind his eyes that was carrying Michael Carter in it every time he looked at her, not painfully, but as a presence, the way you carry someone who mattered. "He trusted you," she said. It was not quite a question. "We trusted each other," Daniel said. "That's different. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Trust isn't something one person gives and the other receives. It goes both ways, or it's not trust, it's just need." He looked at her steadily. "You walked in here with his chain and his vest, and you let us help you. That was trust. Now let us carry some of the rest of it too. So you don't have to carry it all." She thought about the chain in the box in the closet. She thought about 5 years of closed doors and borrowed offices and court clerks who looked through her and lawyers who took her money and stopped calling back. She thought about the weight she had distributed across this table over the past 3 days, not shed, not abandoned, but shared. The way weight is bearable when enough people take a portion of it. She thought about Marcus wanting to come back to the shop. She thought about her father's voice. The last night she had heard it, pressing the chain into her hands. "If you ever have nowhere else to go." She understood now what he had really meant. Not nowhere to go. The opposite. Everywhere to go, every direction that mattered, because the people in that room would walk it with her. "Okay," she said to Daniel. "I'll go." She picked up her father's vest, folded it one more time, stood up. Joseph looked up from across the table. "Tomorrow, 8:30, she said. Sandra, without looking up from her laptop, 8. Haley almost smiled. 8, she corrected. She walked through the Iron Horse for what felt like the 100th time in 3 days through the tables and the low light and the familiar sounds of a room that had become, without her fully noticing the moment it happened, a place where she belonged. She pushed through the front door into the Arizona night. She stopped for a moment in the parking lot, looked up. The sky was very dark and very wide, the way it gets in the desert when there's no cloud cover, stars thick and close. She held the vest under her arm. She felt the weight of it, not heavy, not anymore. She had spent 5 years carrying things alone. She had been so certain that the weight was hers, that the fight was hers, that the asking for help was a failure rather than a form of courage. Her father had known. Of course, he had known. He had pressed the chain into her hands and said, "Bring this to them." And what he had been giving her was not a last resort. He had been giving her a beginning that she would only be ready for when she had learned enough about carrying things alone to know why she didn't have to. She had learned it. It had taken 5 years and 2 days and one very long drive on a hot Arizona night to a bar full of strangers who turned out to be exactly who he had told her they were. She walked to her car, got in. Set the vest on the passenger seat. 58 miles away in a Phoenix holding facility, Robert Payne was having a conversation with his attorney that was not going the way he had expected any conversation in his life to go. In a conference room in the U.S. Attorney's office, Victor Sheldon was explaining, for the third time, how much he knew and how willing he was to share it. In a federal database, the names of 23 families were attached to a restitution filing that Sandra Reeves had signed and submitted at 4 p.m., and which had been received and logged and assigned a case number. And in a motel 4 miles from the Iron Horse Tavern, Haley Carter put her father's vest on the pillow beside her and slept for 8 unbroken hours for the first time in 2 years. She woke up at 5:58, 2 minutes before her alarm, and lay still for a moment in the quiet of the motel room with her hand resting on her father's vest beside her on the pillow. 8 hours. She had not slept 8 consecutive hours in 2 years. She knew this the way you know things that have been true. For so long, they stop feeling like facts and start feeling like the shape of your life. She had grown so accustomed to the broken sleep of someone whose brain refused to stop working that the fullness of it waking rested. Genuinely rested felt almost foreign, like putting on a coat she had forgotten she owned. She lay still for 60 seconds. Let the previous 4 days settle into sequence in her mind: the drive to the Iron Horse, the chain hitting the floor, Daniel's face when he saw the vest, Dex at his legal pad, Sandra's voice on the phone at 6:41, the 4 simultaneous warrants, Will's walking into the FBI field office with his attorney, the indictment filing, 23 families on a restitution document with a case number. She ran through it the way she used to run through her father's shop inventory as a teenager, methodically, item by item, making sure everything was accounted for and nothing had slipped through the gap between night and morning. It was all still there. It had not been a dream. She got up, got dressed, put the vest under her arm, drove to the Iron Horse. Sandra was already there. This had stopped surprising Haley sometime around day 2. Sandra Reeves appeared to operate on a schedule that existed entirely outside normal human time. She was simply present when the work required presence, as if she had decided at some point in her life that sleep was a negotiation and the work generally won. She had coffee in a folder and the expression of someone who had already been on the phone twice this morning and had news. Sheldon's cooperation agreement was finalized. At 11 p.m. last night, Sandra said, before Haley sat down. His attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office reached terms. He's providing a complete account of the operation origin, structure, the arrangement with wills, the Briggs documentation system, the intimidation protocols. She paused. He confirmed 26 families, not 23. 3 additional cases we hadn't found yet. 2 in Nevada, 1 in Utah. 26, Haley sat down slowly. 26 families, she said. 26, Sandra confirmed. And Sheldon says there were cases they considered and decided against families that had too much legal infrastructure around them. Heirs who were lawyers themselves, estates that had active accountants. They selected for vulnerability deliberately. People who were grieving, who didn't have money for sustained legal fights, who were operating in the gap between knowing something was wrong and being able to prove it. She looked at Haley directly. People exactly like you, except you didn't have the one thing they counted on their victims not having. What's that? Haley asked. Someone who told you where to go when you ran out of road, Sandra said. Dex came through the door at 8:10 with Pete behind him, and the energy they carried was different from the previous days, not less urgent, but cleaner, the energy of people moving through the execution phase of something rather than the discovery phase. The investigation had done its work. The structure was exposed. Now what remained was the slower, harder, more personal work of repair. I spoke to the Nevada families last night, Pete said, dropping into a chair and opening his laptop. Both of them still have their documentation. Both are willing to join the restitution filing. I'm adding them now. He looked up. The Utah case is more complicated. The heir, a man named Roy Castillo, lost the property 4 years ago and moved. I have a last known address in Salt Lake City. I'm working on a current contact. Keep working, Sandra said. Rook appeared from the back at 8:30, with a look on his face that Haley had learned to read as information requiring immediate attention. He sat down, leaned forward, and said, Payne's attorney filed a motion this morning. Emergency motion to suppress the physical records from the office search. Claims the warrant was improperly scoped. Sandra did not look up from her folder. That motion will be denied. You sound certain, Rook said. I am certain, Sandra said. Reyes doesn't write improperly scoped warrants. She spent 4 hours on that language before she signed it. The motion is theater, Payne's attorney filing something to demonstrate to his client that he's fighting. It won't succeed, but it will generate news coverage. She looked up, which means by this afternoon, the story is public. The room absorbed this. Public, Haley said. Indictment filings are public record, Sandra said. A journalist will find it. Probably already has. By this evening, there will be reporting on a federal fraud indictment involving a multi-state property scheme targeting grieving families. She looked at Haley steadily. Your name will not appear in the initial reporting because you're a cooperating witness and Reyes has kept your identity protected. But the story is going to move quickly and it's going to be large. I want you prepared for that. Haley thought about what large meant. She thought about 26 families, about Joseph and Patricia and Gerald in Albuquerque and the Rourkes in Denver and Diane Marsh in Colorado Springs and Roy Castillo, who had moved to Salt Lake City, and 2 families in Nevada and 1 in Utah. That Pete was still trying to find, and all the others. The names she knew and the names she didn't. The people who had been sitting with their private certainty that something was wrong and their private inability to prove it. She thought about what it would mean for them to open a news website this evening and see their story, not their specific name. Not yet, but the shape of what had happened to them, confirmed and named, and in federal proceedings. She thought about what it had meant to her 4 days ago to hear Daniel say, we're going to take this seriously. The specific physical relief of it, the thing that had loosened in her chest when the weight was shared. She hoped they felt that when they read it. She hoped 26 people in 4 states opened that story and felt the loosening. Daniel came in at 9 carrying nothing, which meant he had already done whatever he had needed to do this morning before arriving. He sat down across from Haley and looked at her the way he had been looking at her since the first night, with the double vision of Michael's daughter and herself, layered inseparable. How are you, he asked. Better, she said. This time it was a complete answer, not a deflection. He heard the difference, nodded once. The arraignment is Friday, she said. I know, he said. Sandra told me. I want to be there, she said. Sandra looked up from across the table. Haley, I know it's not required, Haley said. I know it's procedural. I know Payne and Sheldon will be arraigned and enter pleas, and the whole thing will take 20 minutes and nothing dramatic will happen. She looked at Sandra. I want to be there anyway. Sandra held her gaze for a moment. Okay, she said. I'll be there with you, Rook said. From across the table, some of us will be there too. Haley looked at him. You don't need to. We know, he said simply. At 10:15, Sandra's phone rang. She looked at the number, stood up without excusing herself, and walked toward the back door. She was gone for 19 minutes. When she came back, she stood at the table without sitting down and looked at Haley with an expression that Haley had not seen on her face before, not the controlled satisfaction of the past few days, not the focused urgency of someone managing a moving case, but something more open than that, something that required a moment to identify. It was the look of someone about to deliver something they had been hoping to deliver. That was Reyes, Sandra said. The paper records from Payne's office, the filing cabinets they found yesterday morning, included a complete set of property holding files. Every asset in the consolidated asset holdings portfolio, with acquisition records, current status, and internal valuation notes. She paused. Your father's shop is listed as a non-performing asset. It's been vacant since acquisition. They never redeveloped it, never leased it, never sold it. It's been sitting there for 2 years. She paused again. And because the original transfer documents have been demonstrated as fraudulent and the property has not passed to a good faith third-party purchaser, The federal court has the authority to issue a provisional asset freeze and return order. She looked at Haley. Reyes is filing for it today. If the court approves, and she believes it will, the property is frozen as of this afternoon and restored to your possession, pending the final restitution judgment. The table was completely silent. Restored, Haley said. The words came out slightly uneven, not broken, but with weight on it, the weight of a word that contains too much to say at normal volume. It's not final, Sandra said, immediately and clearly, because she was Sandra and she did not let emotion outrun accuracy. The provisional order freezes it and gives you access. The final restitution judgment, which will come with the criminal sentencing, makes it permanent. But the provisional order means you can walk back into that building. She paused. Possibly as early as tomorrow. Joseph said from across the table, in a voice that was very quiet, "This is real." "This is real," Sandra said. Patricia put both hands flat on the table and stared at them and breathed. Haley did not move. She was holding the edge of the table with both hands. Without having noticed, she'd reached for it. And she was looking at her father's vest on the stool beside her. And she was doing the arithmetic of what Sandra had just said, not the legal arithmetic, not the procedural sequence, but the simple arithmetic of what it meant. The building where her father had worked every day for 15 years. The lift he had installed himself in 2003. The small office in the back where he kept his invoices in a box that was probably still there, dusty and locked and real. The parking lot where she had learned to change a tire when she was 9 years old because he had believed that a person who didn't know how their car worked was at the mercy of everyone who did. She had been at the mercy of people for 2 years. She was done with that. She looked at Daniel. He was looking at her. He would be, she started. "I know," Daniel said. She didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need her to. Marcus called at 11:45. He had already heard Sandra's associate had called him after the Reyes conversation because Marcus had been part of this from before the beginning, and he deserved to hear everything as it happened in real time, not as a secondhand summary at the end of the day. "They're giving it back," Marcus said. His voice was full in a way she hadn't heard since before the accident. "They're actually giving it back. Provisional order today," she said. "Final with sentencing. I'll be out of this hospital in 2 weeks," Marcus said. "Physical therapy after that. But Haley," his voice tightened, "I want to be there when you walk back in. I want to be standing next to you when you walk through that door." "You will be," she said. "I'll wait for you." A silence. "You don't have to wait," he said. "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to." He didn't say anything for a moment. She could hear him breathing, on the other end, controlled, deliberate, the breathing of a man keeping himself together across a phone line. "Your father," Marcus said finally. "He built something that outlasted him. Not just the building, not just the equipment. He built the kind of thing where people still want to come back to it years later, even after everything." He paused. "That's rare. That's really rare. I know," she said. "Don't let them take that from you again," he said. Not warning, instruction. The voice of the man who had been her father's right hand for 12 years, extending the tenure of that role. "I won't," she said. The story broke at 2:17 in the afternoon. Pete found it first, a regional legal news outlet that had been monitoring federal court filings, and picked up the indictment paperwork. He put his laptop on the table, and everyone read the headline. "Federal indictment targets multi-state property fraud scheme, 26 families across 5 states named as victims." The article was accurate, spare and factual, the way legal reporting tends to be before the larger outlets pick it up and add context. It named Payne, Sheldon Briggs, and Wills. It described the document fraud mechanism, the duplicate notary seals, the county recorder insider, the shell company network. It described the victim pattern, small businesses, grieving heirs, people who hadn't had the resources to fight a system that had been specifically designed to be unfightable. It did not name Haley. Reyes had kept that protection intact. But at the bottom of the article, in the section describing how the case came to federal attention, was a single sentence. The investigation was initiated by documentation compiled by a private individual who brought the evidence to the FBI through legal counsel. Rook read that sentence, looked at Haley, said nothing. She read it 3 times. A private individual, 26 families across 5 states, a fraud scheme that had been running for 8 years, that had been specifically designed to be invisible, that had processed 26 properties through a corrupt recorder's desk without triggering a single official investigation. Until a private individual with 3 binders and her dead father's chain had walked through a door she had been afraid to walk through for 5 years. Daniel read the article over her shoulder. When he finished, he straightened up and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The phone is going to start ringing." He was right. By 3 o'clock, 2 of the other families, the Rourkes in Denver, who had found the article through a Google alert they had apparently set on Consolidated Asset Holdings months ago, had contacted Sandra. By 4 o'clock, Gerald Hauser had called Haley directly. His voice was no longer rough and careful, but something closer to the voice she imagined he'd had for 3 years of fighting a fraudulent transfer had worn it down. "It's in the news," he said. "My son called me." He read it. He said, "Dad, you were right." Gerald stopped. 36 years I ran that store. My son is 52 years old, and he called me to say I was right." Another stop. "I needed him to know that. I needed that more than the building." "You get both," Haley said. "You're going to get both." At 4:45, Patricia Enns received a call from a journalist. She called Sandra. Sandra told her exactly what to say. "No comment pending the proceedings. Refer all inquiries to counsel." Patricia did this with what Sandra later described as admirable restraint, given how much she clearly wanted to say the opposite. At 5:30, a second article appeared, this one from a larger outlet, a Phoenix-based news organization that had done additional reporting. This article had a detail the first one didn't. A description of how the initial evidence had been assembled, including the reference to a notary whose credentials had been duplicated and who had come forward as a cooperating witness after being contacted by the private investigator behind the case. Raymond Chu had given a statement. It was brief and careful, and entirely his. He had chosen to be named, had made that decision with his attorney, because he wanted the record to show that he had been a victim of the system he was now helping dismantle and not a participant in it. Haley read his statement in the article and felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not for herself. For him. For a man who had been afraid for 14 months and had replied to an email at 2 in the morning and had shown up to a diner at 9 a.m. and had done the harder thing. At 6 p.m., Sandra called a meeting at the back table of the Iron Horse that included Haley, Joseph, Patricia, Dex, Pete, Daniel, Rook, Boone, and Raymond Chu, who had driven up from the south side of the city and looked, when he walked in, like a man who had made a decision and was at peace with the weight of it. Sandra stood at the head of the table. She did not have a prepared speech. She had notes, but she set them aside. In 4 days, she said, what started as one person's documentation of one fraudulent property transfer has become a 26-family federal fraud case with 4 defendants facing RICO charges, a cooperating county official, a cooperating co-defendant, and a provisional asset return order on the property that started all of this. She looked around the table. I have been practicing law for 22 years. I have not seen a private investigation come together this quickly, if this cleanly or this completely. She paused. That is because of every person at this table. But it started with one person. It started with someone who spent 2 years building evidence alone and then spent one night trusting the right room with it. She looked at Haley. Haley looked back at her. The arraignment is Friday, Sandra continued. Sentencing will be several months away. Federal cases move at their own pace, and we need to be patient with that timeline. The restitution proceedings for all 26 families will run parallel to the prosecution. Some cases will resolve faster than others, depending on the status of the individual properties. She looked at the table at all of them. This is not over Friday. This is over when the last family has what belongs to them. And we are going to make sure that happens. She paused. All of it. Every case, every family. Every building and bank account and piece of equipment that can be returned will be returned. Joseph said, "Thank you." He said it to Sandra, and then he looked at Haley. Said it again. Meant it differently both times. Patricia nodded. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Raymond Chu looked at Haley across the table. "I've been trying to figure out what to say to you since I got your email," he said. "I've been thinking about it for 3 days. I keep ending up at the same place." He paused. "Thank you for finding me. I needed someone to find me." Haley looked at him. "You needed someone to show you that reporting it was safe," she said. "You would have gotten there. Maybe," he said, "but I'd been sitting with it for 14 months. I don't know how much longer I had." He paused. "You gave me a door to walk through, same as someone gave you one." She held that, felt the way it fit against everything else, the chain in the box in the closet, the door she had been afraid of, the room on the other side of it. She thought about the way things worked when they worked right. Someone holds a door, someone walks through, someone finds the next door and holds it for the person behind them. The chain passing forward, not literally, but in the way her father had meant it when he pressed it into her hands, not the chain itself, but what the chain represented, the connection, the network of people who kept their word and showed up and made the next door possible. She thought about 26 families, about the doors she was going to have to help find and hold for the ones still in the dark. "I need to ask something," she said. She was looking at Daniel. "The families we haven't been able to reach yet, the 3 cases in Nevada and Utah that Pete is still working on, and any others that come out of the Sheldon cooperation statement. I want to make sure someone is tracking them. I want to make sure no one falls through." "Already on it," Pete said from across the table. "I want to be the one who calls them," she said, "when we find them. Not a paralegal, not an intermediary. Me. I want to be the one who tells them we found the connection and they're not alone." Sandra looked at her. "That's going to take time." "I know," Haley said. "I have time now. The investigation is moving. Sandra and Reyes have the prosecution. Dex and Pete have the restitution documentation. What I can do, what only I can do, is call 26 people and tell them that someone looked for them and found them." She paused. "Because that's what I needed. That's the thing that would have changed everything if I'd had it 2 years earlier. Someone calling and saying, 'I see what happened to you, and I am not going to stop until it's right.'" The table was quiet. Daniel said, "Then that's what you do." The provisional asset return order came through at 9:17 the following morning. Sandra called Haley with the case number while Haley was still in the motel parking lot getting into her car. She read the order on her phone, standing in the morning sun. And then she sat in the driver's seat for 5 minutes without starting the engine. She called Marcus. "The order came through," she said. A silence. "Then go," Marcus said. "Don't wait for me." "Haley, go today. Go right now. I'll be there when I'm out of here. But you go today, are you sure?" "Your father would kill me if I made you wait," Marcus said. "Go." She drove to the shop. It was a 20-minute drive she had made 10,000 times. She knew every turn. She knew the sound of her tires on the specific stretch of road 2 blocks before the turnoff, knew the way the light hit the signage in the morning, knew the particular silence of an empty parking lot at an hour before opening time. She had driven this road for years before it was taken, and then she had avoided it entirely, had taken a different route to get anywhere in that part of the city, because driving past it was something she could not do without the particular grief of seeing a thing you love behind glass, close and unreachable. She pulled into the parking lot. She sat in the car for 60 seconds. Then she got out. She had the key. She had always had it, a copy she had made when she was 16 and running the front office, a duplicate that had never been surrendered because no one had asked for it, because the men who took the building through forged paperwork had never imagined someone had a key. It had been on her keychain for 2 years, a daily reminder that she was locked out of something that was hers. She put it in the lock. It turned. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her, first oil and metal, and the particular dusty warmth of a closed space that has been machinery's home for a long time. It was exactly what she remembered. The smell of her childhood, of her father in his work clothes at the end of a day, of every after-school afternoon she had spent in this building doing homework at the front desk while he worked the floor. Nothing about it had changed. The building had been sitting exactly as it was left, exactly as it had been when the last day came, and she had been locked out before she understood she was being locked out. She walked in, did not turn on the lights, stood in the space and let it settle around her. Her father's toolbox was still against the wall. The lift, the one he had installed in 2003, the one he had been so proud of, the one she had heard him tell the story of installing at least 40 times, was still there. Lowered to floor level, the hydraulic fluid in it, probably gone dry. Fixable. The front desk had paperwork on it that was 2 years old, covered in a thin film of dust. But there, the coffee maker on the counter that he had bought because he insisted customers should always have good coffee while they waited. She walked to the back office. His invoices were still in the box. Dusty, locked. She had the key for that too. She opened the box. She looked at the top invoice dated a week before he died. A name she recognized, a regular customer. The man with the old pickup truck who had been coming in for years, who had sent her a card when her father died and another card when she lost the shop. She looked at her father's handwriting on the invoice, the careful, slightly tilted block letters of a man who had learned to write in a different era and never changed his style. She closed the box, put both hands flat on the desk. She had been so afraid that coming back would feel like the worst thing, that the weight of what had been done here would be heavier than the weight of the memory. She had been afraid it would feel like a crime scene more than a homecoming. It didn't. It felt like his. It felt like him. It felt like the building had been holding the shape of him while she was gone, keeping it intact, waiting. She heard the front door open. She turned around. Daniel was standing in the doorway. Rook behind him. Boone behind Rook, Joseph, Patricia. Dex with his legal pad, because of course, Dex had his legal pad. Pete. Raymond Chu, who had driven over without being asked. Sandra last, in a blazer, despite the morning heat, looking at the space with the expression of someone satisfying herself that what she had worked for is real. They had all come. She had not called any of them. She had not needed to. This was the room that kept its word, and keeping its word apparently included showing up on a Thursday morning to a repair shop on the edge of Tucson because Michael Carter's daughter was walking back in for the first time. She stood in the doorway of the back office and looked at all of them and understood completely, finally, without reservation, what her father had given her when he pressed the chain into her hands. Not a last resort, not an emergency plan, a family. Well, Sandra said, looking around the shop with the practical assessment of someone already thinking 3 steps ahead, we have a lot of work to do. We do, Haley said. The lift needs servicing, Dex observed, for no particular reason except that he was Dex. I know how to service it, Rook said. I know, Haley said, that this is going to take months to fully restore. The restitution case, the other families, the sentencing, the property repair. She looked at all of them. And I know I'm not doing any of it alone. Daniel was looking at her father's toolbox. He walked to it slowly, ran his hand along the top of it the way you touch something that belonged to someone who mattered. He stood there for a moment. Nobody said anything. Then he turned around and looked at Haley. No, he said, you're not. The arraignment on Friday lasted 22 minutes. Robert Payne entered a not guilty plea in a voice that had lost the measured confidence of the man who had made a phone call from a parking lot 6 days ago. Victor Sheldon, having finalized his cooperation agreement, was processed separately. Carl Briggs, his passport frozen and his assets under federal hold, entered a not guilty plea through clenched teeth and an attorney who looked like he was already pricing the appeal. Garrett Wills, who had walked into the FBI office voluntarily and told them everything, was processed as a cooperating witness and would face separate, reduced charges. Haley sat in the gallery with Sandra on one side and Daniel on the other. She watched Robert Payne stand before the court. She watched the judge read the charges. She watched Payne's attorney stand and say the words "not guilty," and she watched Payne not look at the gallery, not look at anyone, look at a middle distance that contained only the wreckage of a system he had believed was bulletproof. She felt nothing toward him that resembled satisfaction. What she felt was simpler than that, the clean, structural feeling of a wrong thing being corrected. Not revenge, correction. The difference between those two things was everything. And she knew it the way her father had known things that he tried to explain to her when she was young enough to think she was learning about engines and was actually learning about life. After the arraignment, on the courthouse steps, with the Arizona morning already warm around them, Sandra turned to her and said, "It moves into prosecution now. It's going to be slower from here. Federal cases don't run on the same timeline as our last 5 days." "I know," Haley said. "You're going to have to be patient," Sandra said. "I've been patient for 2 years," Haley said. "I can be patient for a little longer." Sandra almost smiled. "Yes," she said. "I imagine you can." She called all 26 families over the following 3 weeks. Some of them had already heard through the news coverage. Some had been living in the private wilderness of their own grief and their own certainty that something was wrong and their own inability to prove it, and had not yet emerged enough to see the article or the case number or the name of the indicted men they had been trying to name for years. Those calls were the ones she did not hurry. She sat with each one for as long as they needed. She answered every question. She said the thing that had changed everything for her when she heard it. "I see what happened to you, and I am not going to stop until it's right." Every single one of them cried, even the ones who said they weren't going to. She didn't tell them not to. She let it be what it was. She had learned in the past week that the weight of held things is the weight of held things, and the only way through it is through. Marcus came out of the hospital 19 days after the arraignment. His arm was in a soft brace, and his ribs still ached when he moved wrong. But he was upright and moving, and he called Haley from the parking lot of the hospital before he even got to his car. "Ready," he said. "I'll pick you up," she said. She drove him to the shop. They stood in the parking lot together for a moment before going in. Marcus, who had worked here for 12 years under her father and 2 years under her, looking at the front of the building with the expression of a man returning from a long and unwanted journey. "Still the same," he said. "Mostly," she said. "The lift needs work. I know how to fix the lift," he said. "I know you do," she said. She unlocked the door and held it open. He walked in ahead of her, and she watched him stop in the middle of the floor and look around, slow and complete, the way you look at something you weren't sure you'd see again. He looked at the toolbox against the wall. He walked to it, ran his hand along the top of it the same way Daniel had. Then he looked at her. "Let's get to work," he said. 6 months later, Robert Payne was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. Victor Sheldon, whose cooperation had been the first crack in the dam, received 12 years with parole eligibility at 8. Carl Briggs was sentenced to 18 years. The judge, in the sentencing remarks, noted that as the legal architect of the scheme, Briggs bore a particular responsibility for the sophistication and duration of the fraud, and that his sentencing reflected the weight of designing a system that had deliberately targeted people at their most vulnerable. Garrett Wills received 6 years and full restitution obligations. His cooperation credit applied, but his decade of complicity not forgiven. The restitution judgments came in sequence over the following 8 months. Every family received a formal finding of fraudulent transfer. Every property that could be returned was returned. For the properties that had been sold on to good faith third parties, 4 of the 26 cases, the court established a restitution fund from Consolidated Asset Holdings' seized assets, and each family received a settlement that Sandra negotiated with the dogged, meticulous persistence of someone who understood that money was not the same as the thing that had been taken, but was the closest the law could come. Michael Carter's shop cleaned, repaired, the lift serviced, and restored to working order by Rook. And 2 men whose road names Haley never learned, but whose work was impeccable, reopened on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Marcus was at the front desk. Haley was in the back office, at her father's desk, with his invoices in the box to her left and a new set of accounts open on her laptop. The coffee maker was running. The parking lot had 3 cars in it, regulars who had heard the shop was back and had been waiting. At 10 in the morning, Daniel Walker pulled into the lot on his bike. He came in, took the coffee that Marcus handed him without being asked, sat in the waiting area, and said nothing for a while. Just drank the coffee and watched the shop function. After a while, he said to Haley, "Your father would say something right now. Something that sounds like it's about engines, but is actually about something else." She looked up from the desk. What would he say? Daniel thought for a moment. He would say, "The job's not done when the problem is fixed. The job's done when you understand what caused it, so it doesn't happen again." She held that. "We've got 26 families who know what happened to them," she said, "who have it on record, who have documentation and a federal case number and a judgment." She paused. "But there are other families, other cities, other men like Payne who are doing the same thing to different people right now. And those people don't have a chain in a box in a closet or a room to walk into." "No," Daniel said. "They don't. I want to fix that," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "You knew before I said it. Your father was the same way," he said. Fixed one engine and immediately started thinking about the next one. He set down his coffee cup. Sandra's already been thinking about it too. She mentioned a legal aid foundation, a specific model for helping heirs of small business owners navigate property challenges. "She mentioned it to me too," Haley said, "last week. And I think we should build it," she said. "I think we should build something that exists so that the next person, the next 20-year-old or 60-year-old or whoever has a fraudulent notice and nowhere to turn has a door to walk through that doesn't require them to already know where to look." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The same double vision, Michael's daughter and herself, layered. He had stopped trying to separate them, she thought. He had stopped seeing the resemblance as a ghost and started seeing it as a continuation. "You know what your father would say about that," he said. "Tell me," she said. He'd say, "Who's going to do the work?" She almost smiled. "We are," she said. It was not an ending. It was the kind of moment that looks like an ending from a distance, but is actually up close. The moment a new thing begins the shop running again. Marcus at the front desk, 26 families with their cases on the record. 4 men in federal custody, and a 20-year-old woman who had walked into a biker bar with a chain and a dead man's vest sitting at her father's desk, understanding that the chain had never been about ending something. It had always been about beginning. Her father had known that. He had pressed it into her hands and trusted her to figure out the rest. She had. Michael Carter built more than a business when he spent 15 years fixing engines in Tucson, Arizona. He built a daughter who paid attention, kept records, refused to quit, and finally walked through the right door at the right moment. And what walked out the other side was not just a recovered property or a one case or a set of men in federal prison where they belonged. What walked out was a woman who understood that the greatest thing a person can build is not a business or a reputation or even a legacy. It is the kind of trust that outlives you, that gets pressed into someone's hands like a chain and carried for years, and finally brought to the people who were always waiting to help carry it home.